It's now 9 o'clock on Friday, the 22nd of August, and it is time now for the Budget Committee to come into session. So I'd like to say good morning to all of our members, all of the officials who are on board. Welcome to this meeting. I think, as we all know, the Budget Committee has been somewhat reconstituted. There are a number of new members on the permanent committee, of which I'm one, and so therefore I'd like to welcome everyone to this journey that we are now all undertaking. And for purposes of the record, and just to check that we are curate, we'll just go around the room as such and give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll start with the members. I'm Leon van Wyk. I'm the chair of the Budget Committee, and I hand over to you honorary members, and then thereafter the officials, head of department, welcome to you, and each of you can then introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, our colleagues from the Provincial Treasury. My name is Noko Masipa. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair.
Derek Wessels, and I'm also a member of the committee.
Morning, Chair, Beauty Stoffers, and good morning to everyone, member of the committee.
Morning, Chairperson Dave Bryant, member of the committee.
Morning, Chair and colleagues. I'm Basil Pietras.
Morning, Chairperson. Morning, officials. I'm Member Boyson, an alternate member of the committee.
Morning, all. I'm a French Mbombo.
I'm Thomas Walters.
Good morning, Chair. Khalil Parantes. I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm attending today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chairperson, officials, President Allen, Deputy Speaker.
Morning, everyone. Benedicta van Minnen, member of this committee.
I think we may have been through all of the members there. Welcome to you. Good morning. And then
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chairperson Grant Murray, alternate member of the committee.
good morning to you, Member Marais. I'm now going to hand over to HOD. I'm just see we cover quite a few screens here. So good morning to you, HOD. Amina Fakira, so you can introduce yourself and then for your team to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chairperson, members and officials from the department. My name is Hamida Fakira. Maybe I should just put my camera on. I've just joined the Department of Mobility. Good morning, everyone. I've just joined the Department of Mobility 1st of August. And the officials of the department are also here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we can go through. I can see the very familiar face of Deirdre Ribbenaar. Good day to you.
Good morning, Chairperson, members, Deirdre Ribbenaar, Mobility Department.
Good day, members and officials, committee members. Ricardo Collins, Mobility Department.
Another very familiar face and name for myself, who have dealt with these officials in George on the Go George project.
Good morning, Chairperson Sheldon LaRue, Western Cape Mobility Department.
I think I'm just looking through. Are there any officials that still need to
My apologies.
greet us this morning?
My apologies. Morning, Chairperson and members. Vuyulo Kunjalo, Head of Ministry for Mobility.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. And then we've got our team of procedural officers here. I think if you will also just introduce yourselves.
Morning, Chairperson, honourable members, officials. Dustin Davids, a procedural officer, Budget Committee. Thank you.
It's important important, Mr. Davids, that I hear your voice because you are the very key cabin controller here on our little spaceship today.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members. Lizette Kluter, Senior Procedural Officer.
Good morning, Lizette.
Good morning,
members.
Good morning, colleagues. Masintle Mkhobata, Committee Assistant.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, members. Shamiz Jones, Procedural Officer, Infrastructure.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I think we're having done the introductions there. The business of the day comprises essentially two parts. There's a presentation by the Fiscal and Finance Commission and also a presentation by Department of Mobility on the Go George project. And what I'm suggesting that we do is that we deal with the Go George project first, because that's likely to be relatively short in comparison to the Fiscal and Finance Commission presentation, so that we can deal with that and dispose with that item. Now, the Go George item comes from a previous budget committee meeting where there were a number of resolutions and recommendations were made that this committee will be clearing over the next few meetings. So I think if I can hand over to the Go George team then to do their presentation. And HOD, I'm not sure if you've got any introductory remarks or will just lead us into this presentation. I think, as always, we will take the presentation as members and then we'll be able to follow up with questions thereafter.
Thank you, Chairperson. We've got a presentation on the Go George funding and budget allocation, and it will be presented to you and the members by Deirdre, supported by Ricardo from the Department Mobility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. With your permission, if I'm just allowed to share my screen.
You can go ahead, please.
Is the screen visible, Chairperson?
Yes, certainly. We can probably just enlarge it, I imagine. There we are.
Is in presentation mode. Thank you very much, Chairperson and committee members, for this opportunity. The presentation is not a very long one, since we focus specifically, obviously, on the financial allocations and some of the objectives as spelled out in the communique to the department, and also the impact of the Go George system on, specifically in this case, the George municipality. In order just to start with, Chairperson, I think it's important just to sketch the context within which we are operating. The Go George bus system is the first non-metro IPTN in South Africa, and the aim primarily is to provide a safe, reliable and affordable bus service, and more importantly, that's universally accessible to the residents of George or living within the jurisdiction of George municipality. Now, this bus system is done in collaboration with or in partnership between the Western Cape government and the George municipality, and a majority of the funding comes from the National Department of Transport. So there's essentially three role players, albeit that the bus service is operated and managed by the Western Cape government and the George municipality. At this juncture, Chairperson, the bus service carries on average about 21,500 weekday passengers, which covers approximately 80% of the households in the George area. As we speak today, the George bus service is the second largest in terms of carrying passengers in the country in relation to IPTNs. I think at the last engagement we had with the National Department of Transport, we've overtaken Joburg in terms of the amount of passengers being carried on a daily basis. So the bus service has 6 phases, which spans across George. We have rolled out 4 of the stages, the last of it being 4A, which spans into the community of Thembaletu, which is the most densely populated and historically underdeveloped area in George. The network has significantly improved mobility and accessibility to the people of George, and obviously supporting in that the economic growth in George. I will just briefly highlight and do an overview in terms of what the system entails from a Go George perspective. The VOC in George employs at this stage, or at the end of June, employed 388 staff members. The majority of them obviously being bus drivers, that's 308 of them. The bus service is 100% smart card system driven, and it operates for 15 hours a day. The highest average, as I've already said, about 21,500 passengers on average. And the highest amount of passengers per month that we saw in the financial year 2024 to 2025 was about 524,000 passengers per month. I've already spoken about the coverage, covering about 80% of George, with a vehicle fleet of 133 buses at this stage. So approximately at this stage, 505,000 people on average passengers are passenger trips per month are being delivered by the service in the 2024 financial year. Just moving on, Chairperson, to just perhaps explain a little bit better the coverage. And just by way of illustration, I've said that there's 4 phases that has been rolled out thus far. Go George currently operates on 34 routes within the network, which comprises both of a mainline service and then obviously community services. The headways on the mainline and the community services range between 7 minutes and 30 minutes during the peak periods, depending on the area and depending on the demand that we experience. Now, moving swiftly into what does it cost to run the services. The funding, as you would see on the screen, Chairperson, is primarily made up of 5 sources. The sources at this stage is the PTNG grant, Provincial Transport Network grant, that we get from the National Department. Then we have the Western Cape Government Mobility Department grant. We have the fare revenue that's received from the service. We have a municipality of George contribution, and then there's also an interest portion on the funding that gets allocated to the service. You would see over the MTEF period, the numbers has been spelled out, and also we've indicated that where these costs are primarily geared and focused towards. I must just say that in terms of the fare revenue specifically, This is obviously predicted on the basis of the rollout of phase 4A, particularly the full service from Thembalethu to the various areas within George. And also the funding excludes the incentive proportion, which is determined on an annually basis, depending on the performance of the project. Maybe just to pause there a bit, the National Department does have an allocation that they give during the adjustments period to the various municipalities, and it's purely based on performance of that particular municipality that they are in line to receive any funding in relation to the performance or incentive portion of the project. If I can move on, Chairperson, just to the next slide, which speaks of the incentive allocations. Now, George has been fortunate over the last 2 financial years that they've received about 755 million rand in incentive allocation from the national departments, which obviously speaks to the performance of the project in George. This funding has primarily been used to deal with the upgrades and rehabilitation of GIPTN infrastructure. The improvements was done to bus stop infrastructure, the introduction upgrades of transfer locations within the George precinct, the improvement of non-motorized transport facilities, and then improvement of traffic signalization. You would understand the last one being important to ensure that the system runs smoothly, and obviously also to encourage people to get on public transport instead of their own vehicles. Chair, then what we also do on an annual basis, we are looking into the future that we may only do it every second year and update the passenger surveys that is conducted every single year. What we've tried in this slide is just to present to you what has been the outcome of the 2024 survey that was done. We got our overall passenger satisfaction sitting at 91%. The Go George is seen as offering reliable, safe, accessible, and affordable public transport. The highest scores, just in terms of a highlight, is the drivers, the skilled drivers, the reliability of the service, and the onboard accessibility for people with disabilities. The areas that we need to improve on is the safety and security at bus stops. While this falls perhaps a little bit outside the scope of the bus service itself, but people do experience, unfortunately, in certain areas around town, the element of safety we could see come up quite evidently and regularly for people having to stand at bus stops. Punctuality we see is at 88%. The origin and bus stop proximities is at 84%, and the destination and bus stop proximity is at 94%. Accessibility, specifically, we looked this year at accessibility in relation to people with disabilities. You would find that the bus stops is at 88% satisfaction. The onboard bus accessibility is at 96%. The pathway accessibility to the bus stop is at 100%, and the vendor premises accessibility is at 90%. And then lastly on this slide, the affordability of the service, which I think is largely to do with the funding that goes into the service, is at 91%. Chairperson, just in terms of economic impact, we have a policy on the George service that you are able to transfer for free within 1 hour of getting onto your first bus. Our estimate at this stage over the 10-year period of implementation of the service is that we've been able to put back into pockets of passengers approximately 43 million rand. In terms of the current direct jobs that are attributed to the Go George bus service is standing at 762. That means that the Go George contributes to at least one job in every 98 formal jobs in George. Go George also offers the opportunities to over 236 local businesses, which operates as smart card vendors, which top up services for people with their smart cards. The Go George has created an opportunity for 139 minibus taxi operators to become shareholders in the formalized business environment. And since inception, in ticket prices has been kept in line with inflation to balance the affordability and sustainability of the service. And then Go George in the 23-24 financial year spent about 406 million rand on creditors in the local area of George. And our estimation, which is a very simple one, is that equates to approximately 1.1 million per day that goes into the local economy of George. So just in conclusion then, the GIP10 has demonstrated value for the people of George by delivering over a decade safe, affordable and reliable and accessible public transport. We have managed to reach 80% of households and conduct more than 6 million passenger trips annually. The service continues to contribute to the local economy through job creation, support to local business and the cost saving to passengers. The PT&G incentive funding awarded to the GIP10 is recognition of our operational performance has enabled investment in critical infrastructure improvements across the network of George. And the long-term, I think, sustainability of the project relies on the continuation of the intergovernmental partnership, securing additional infrastructure funding and continued operational efficiencies as the network expands. I just found out this morning, I think that's the last slide, Chairperson, but just moving in terms of the previous slide, we were talking about the vendors. In the month of July alone, the mobile vendors, in terms of commissions earned for the sale and top-up of smart cards, were equated to approximately 580,000 rand just in the month of July. That's put back into the economy of George. That is in short the presentation, Chairperson, and we'll welcome any questions from the members. Thank you very much. Apologies, Chairperson, I think you're muted.
Thank you for that. You can see I can only do one thing at a time. I got the camera right, but not my microphone. So thank you very much, Mr. Ricardo Collins, for bringing us up to speed there on the Go George system. And I think, if we look at it from the overall budget type of context, I think we know throughout the world that public transport is always a big issue and a big spend that cities and countries around the world undertake to make sure that their economies are able to function. So I do see a range of hands. I see Honourable Petrus, Honourable Boyson, and then Honourable Mbombo with the first, second, and third. So I think you can go with your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentation. Who's the CEO of the company, Chairperson. I want to know who's the CEO and who are the 6 independent non-executive directors of the company. And my third question is, who is responsible for the safety of our passengers and clients on the Go George buses? Because there are still people waiting for justice. A few years ago, you are aware of that. People were seriously injured because of a petrol bomb, and they're still waiting for assistance. And that's why I'm asking who's responsible for the safety of passengers on the Go George buses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure the team from Go George will handle each of these questions sort of in a bundle. And, so we'll either just see what the length of questions are from members Boyson and Mbombo to see whether we'll take member Stoffel in this round as well. Over to you, member Boyson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, mine is short and is only one. Is there an projected expansion plan for the Go George project, since the Garden Road is probably the second biggest district in the Western Cape? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, member Boyson. Member Mbombo.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, Go George, this project, it is a flagship for the whole country, for the non-metro. At the recent South African Transport Conference that I attended, they did a presentation even to brag about actually George transport more people than even Swane. I don't know what to call the buses in Swane. So they were concerned about Swane that is not picking up, whilst George is a small town compared to the whole of the Swane municipality, which is a metro, that they don't deliver as much as George. So thank you, team, for that. I've taken the bus, I think, twice or 3 times. I hope that the route to Tembalé, I know the Nelson Mandela Boulevard, they do use that route, which is the main road. But I hope that the expansions will be done quickly, because they get so full. The one that I was in is the one that via Parkdale, but it's mostly the people of the Timberlake, which comes from town. Meaning now it creates quite tensions when the bus, it says Parkdale, but people will use it for the Timberlake too. Because it might create like as if they don't want to use the same bus, but you'll find that the reason is because they don't have the buses that are expanded besides those one from the Mandela Boulevard. And then lastly, I was shown, of course, behind the scenes in terms of some of the taxis who benefited from getting monies, becoming part of these partners. But the main thing was about these people get monies that they're supposed to be now, they give away their taxi licenses and then they become part of this project. Yet there's a saying that a background that, and you see that guy there participating this in the George, in the Go George. He bought XYZ cars, he did all of those, but again, retained the license and gave it to someone. So is there a process where once the taxi becomes part of this project, then that license, I don't know who's responsible for that. And then that operating license now shouldn't still be under that person. It must fail to exist. Because now you get people who double dip, who are part of the Go George project, and they don't give away their licenses. They still operate as also as part of a minibus taxi, and also they are actually even double dipping, even in the e-hailing. But the point is about how do you make sure that those who become part of the projects, those licenses cannot be active again. Because there's a whole long list of the other people who wants to apply, but what they do, they sell to the other MTBs. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mbombo. I think we'll take Member Stoffel's question now.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning. Am I audible, Chair?
You're audible.
Thank you very much. Let me appreciate the presentation from I hope it's Mr. Ricardo, if I'm correct. But thank you very much for the presentation. Chair, my first question has been covered by Member Boyson in terms of the projection plan. And then my second question is based on the employment establishment. This is the second largest. George is the second largest bus company, or let's say. But in terms of the figures that will be given, like they've got 300 drivers versus 133 buses and 34 routes. At some stage, Chair, if you add up all these things, somewhere you will pick up an abuse. So my question is, and it's difficult for us now to balance this thing because they mention here they've got 300 drivers. Now you're just wondering, is these people only driving the buses? Who is cleaning the buses? We don't see that here. Because if these people is drivers, which means they must also clean the buses, they must also do everything within that bus system of them. And my third question is that, how many of these drivers is females? Because there's no breakdown of these workers who's working in this company. We don't know how many of these people are black people, how many are, I don't want to go further in. But because we are staying in George, we are staying near George. We know what we are talking and we know what we are asking here. We wanted to see these breakdowns within this presentation because that was the request from the committee to say they must come and present here. So I want more information around that. And then also I'm with Member Bessel in terms of the security system. What security system is there being used there? Because you can go now to the bus stop of Go George, you won't find security there. Within the bus, you won't find. But they are presenting to us here, there's a security system, the people who's making use of the bus, they are safe, but nowhere you see this security amongst those people and there within the bus stops. So I think, I don't want to say that the presentation for me is very short and not really actual. There's no really information that we really want to see, or myself want to see within this presentation. So Chair, let me just pause there, and maybe as time goes and they explain, maybe some of these things will come out, and then I will be able then to be able to digest this thing clearly and getting clear more to me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. I think at this stage I'm going to hold over Member Masipa and give the management team an opportunity to respond to those questions that have been raised so far, and then we can take the questions further with Member Masipa and any others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I will deal with the questions as they came up by the members. I'll start with Member Petrus. Member Petrus, at the moment, the company... I think from Member Petrus, at the moment, the company does not have a CEO. There's not been a CEO appointed for the company, Member Petrus. And as far as my knowledge goes, the 6 non-executive directors has also not been appointed. So the company has been operating with my understanding a chief operations officer and the executive directors, but the 6 non-executive directors has not been appointed. I think the more critical question that came from a Member Petrus is about the safety on the buses for passengers, and we all experienced, unfortunately, in 2023 the petrol bombing, Member Petrus, which was, I think, to my mind, one of only 2 of the worst days, I think, in the town of George and for the bus service particularly. Just to answer the question of Member Petrus, apologies if I'm going to be very legalistic, Member Petrus, and the reason simply for that is that we've been advised previously. We've been advised previously that the passengers that was injured in that incident intends seeking legal advice, and that they would approach attorneys to instigate action against the municipality and obviously the operator. So we are very confined in terms of any statements that we do make, obviously being very cautious about the implications of such statements. I must say that when the incident happened, on that particular day and subsequent days after that, Member Petrus, there was various interventions which was predominantly led by the communications team of the Go George service. The safety of passengers, there is a specific waiver in terms of in terms of the rules of carriage, in terms of liability when passengers do use the service, but that obviously doesn't mean that one needs to be human and act humanitarianly in relation to people or persons that suffers injury as they are using the bus service. I don't think even I'm involved in the service and Golden Arrow in Cape Town. From what I can understand, there is no public liability insurance that you can take out in relation to acts of violence or acts of criminality, rather, let me put it in that way. So the safety of passengers, at the end of the day, there is a waiver. If there's a strict answer to your question, Member Petrus, that in terms of the rules of carriage, that liability does not come to the bus service. But that is as far, unfortunately, that I can go with that comment, Member Petrus. Member Boyson, in terms of the expansion, I will give an opportunity, I think, to Ms. Ribbenaar, maybe just to address that specific aspect. If I can move on to Member Mbombo. Member Mbombo, we are earnestly working on getting the 2 other routes from Thembalethu, which is to the mall and to the CBD, rolled out as soon as possible. As you would have seen from the presentation, we received in excess of 750 million rand, which predominantly went into roadworks and infrastructure upgrades across the town of George. Unfortunately, it's a good problem to have, but with that problem comes the fact that we had to push additional fleet into various areas where these infrastructure upgrades are happening, to ensure that passengers are able to still get to work on time, and particularly during the peak time in the morning. And that has left the capacity in terms of fleet a bit wanting, and has to some extent has been part of the reason for the delay in moving forward with other parts of the service being rolled out, and particularly in the area of Thembaletu. In as far as it relates to the minibus taxi industry and operators that has benefited from the system, Member Mbombu, the agreement with the operators at the time was that they are only incentivized or paid out for the routes that exist on the operating licenses, which meant that they received the operating licenses back without the routes on them. So where they, for example, had staff transport, where they had scholar transport, where they have had other contracted services, those part of the licenses remained with the operator. So from that perspective, the operator would have still had a license, but for the routes that was taken up by the Go George bus service. Obviously, if that operator then decides to sell that permit off, or transfer that permit rather, that has happened in the system. And I think the challenge then becomes a law enforcement challenge rather than a operator challenge or bus service challenge if operators are illegally operating on routes with licenses that does not permit them to do so. But that was part of the agreement, Member Mbombo, that the other non-Go George operating routes was handed back to the operator to be able to still perform those particular functions. I think then from Member Stoffel's side, Member Stoffels, I apologize if there hasn't been enough detail in the presentation. We try to, as strictly as possible, stick to the request that was received from the committee. But obviously, if we are able to provide more information, we will certainly be able to do that. Just in terms, I can confirm, Member Stoffels, that at the moment there is 47 female bus drivers out of that 308 bus drivers. I can assure Member Stoffels that there are other staff employed to do the bus washing. They've got route controllers and various other functions, and bus drivers in the service are simply required to perform the function of driving buses. They are not expected to perform any other function outside of that particular function. In terms, lastly, I think Member Stoffels, in relation to safety and security, safety and security is provided by the municipality to a large extent through its law enforcement unit or agency, and through the traffic law enforcement. We also do have a private security company which predominantly provides services at big transfer locations. For example, the Transport Hub, and for example, the Circle transfer facility in Thembaletu. But there is also a roving unit that performs security services across the system. And it might therefore be that they would not be seen at any specific time at the stop that one may potentially would want them to be, but they are facilitating security across the service. I think I've covered predominantly all the questions, but I think if I can ask Mr. Rabinal just to deal with the projected expansion of the service. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Through you to Honourable Member Boyson's question around expansion plans. So what the department's done is produced Eden Mobility Strategy. Apologies, at the time it was the Eden region and not Garden Route. So we've got a plan in terms of expansion. It is obviously budget dependent, but part of the Go George service is an intertown service. We haven't managed to get to the intertown services, but that will be part of the new contract when this contract is finalized, to go to the surrounding towns in George, in the entire Garden Route area. So that is the expansion plans. We've done mobility strategies for each region in our province, and we are seeking funding for the implementation of these strategies in the other districts as well. I hope that covers that particular question.
Thank you, Ms. Ribbenaar. I'd also just like to welcome Minister Isaac Seleku, who I also see has joined the platform. I know that Member Masipa had his hand up on wanting to ask a question as well. I think the one factor that Mr. Collins, that you didn't cover on the safety side, I suppose, is the extent of fleet or range of cameras across the network, CCTV cameras that are monitored on an ongoing basis, which is another element of the security. Okay, I think I'll hand over to member. I see member Masipa, and then I see member Murray thereafter.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning once again to Minister and to Department of Mobility. Really, we welcome the presentation, and also it will be amiss of me not to say congratulations to the HOD. Well done, and we're looking forward to working with you going forward, ensuring that our residents have the required mobility to get to their workplace or to engage their families. My question really, Chair, is that I do know that, these things, they take time, but in terms of George, it is my understanding that you might be sitting with over 20 wards in that particular area. Maybe if the HOD, through you, HOD, you can share in terms of how many of those wards are covered by Go George. And also the other challenge that we have seen quite recently is the issue of the taxi violence, and obviously banning the e-hailing transport in Maponya Mall. I think more the question to the Minister and the Department as to what measures are in place to just really ensure that, we are not getting affected by this kind of thuggery, violence of some of the taxi owners, and not all taxi owners or taxi drivers that are doing all this kind of things and damaging the properties as it relates to George. Thanks, Chair, very much. I do welcome the presentation as well. I think it was quite comprehensive. Thank you very much to the Department and Minister.
Thank you, Member Masipa. I'd just like to welcome Speaker Dalen Mitchell to the meeting as well. Welcome, and hope you are able to attend a fair bit of this meeting further today. Then Member Murray, and then Member Bryant. And I think any other questions to follow from that, and then I think we can probably wrap this one up. I see Member Nkondlo after that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you, the HOD, for the presentation. Very few success stories in South Africa, and I think the Go George is certainly something that we can be proud of, that is showing a lot of positive and economic spin-offs, positive economic spin-offs for George itself. Chairperson, I just wanted to ask the HOD in terms of the any information on the profile of the commuters that actually make use of the Go George bus service. I just wondered in terms of whether you could give us an indication, or perhaps at another opportunity give us a breakdown of the profile of the commuters, whether it is scholars, what percentage of this, is it scholars or is it mostly SASA people that are on SASA? You know, what sort of person makes use of this particular service that is being rendered? And then I just want to know, in terms of, there was a slight drop in the satisfaction survey. It's still quite high, 91%. Were they able to pin down what were the reasons were for the slight drop in the satisfaction survey that dropped down to 91%? Just like to know. Thank you so much, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Member Murray. I'll hand over to Member Bryant.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I know we have another very successful similar project in the city of Cape Town, the My City service. And my question is just in terms of cooperation and collaboration between Go George and My City. I'm assuming there is ongoing discussion between the two in terms of ensuring best practice and learnings from each other. I just want to know if maybe presenters can expand a little bit on that. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everybody. Chair, there are just two questions I just wanted to ask. And I'm sure the one particularly on the BRT system, which to date, since it was established, it's supposedly to have the first phase should have been, I think, came to an end, for the actual BRT to be put up, for supposedly review and maybe, bringing in or put it up there to a private partner. I'm interested to just check from the colleagues whether to date has there been an evaluation of the BRT, so that when we speak about success, we at least can use an evidence-based evaluation of the program, of what was the program's intention as part of an integrated system, model that the country would have wanted to sort of pilot. So for me, I'm interested to know that specifically, to understand it from a commuter point of view, from the very taxi industry that was supposedly, to hand over their operating licenses with a bigger interest of participating in the transport industry. Have we been able to achieve those outcomes? So that's why I'm asking, has there been any evaluation of the BRT system, which both Go George and My City are part thereof? If not, has there two, especially now because we're talking about Go George, is there any evaluation that has been done either by the Department of Mobility or by the municipality that can be shared with us? The second question is around planning. I hear Ms. Rubina speaks about, the type of plans that they've had, because part of the challenges that we've been seeing, especially in the transport space, is agility of transport planning because of the in-migration that is actually forcing new settlements, particularly informal settlements, which actually are the biggest market of the very Go George and My City, because the people that are actually utilizing the service are more the working class and the poor, more than middle class. So I'm interested to know, in the transport planning space, have there been any work that is being done, one, that ensures annually or any periodic, maybe you can explain, where the very commuters are forming part of transport planning and their views about routes, the type of offerings, including the fares, that we are seeing, because we just recently saw Golden Arrow actually increasing, their bus fares, So is there such, including the taxi industry, because the taxi industry, wise, they would have handed over their operating licenses. It doesn't mean it has closed the industry itself, which is why sometimes, as Member Masipa has raised, we're seeing these altercations that end up being violent because it seems there isn't a clear engagement between government and these types of sort of BRT system. So I'm saying in the Western Cape, is there such from a transport planning point of view? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Mkondlo. And I'm not seeing any further hands. So I think I'm now going to ask the team to deal with those questions, and then we can wrap up this section of the agenda. And if Minister wishes to add any comments, then he's welcome to do that as well. So I think over to the team as such to deal with these last questions. I see Member Petrus looks like wanting to ask a last question there.
Yes, Chairperson, I want to follow up on the answers, if you allow me, especially on the CEO and the six independent executive directors. What is the reason that there's no CEO? And how can the company function without a CEO who's doing that work? And what is the reason that there's no independent directors?
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Mr. Collins can provide an explanation there.
Chairperson, Deidre Ribbenau here. I'll start off with the questions, and then Mr. Collins can jump in at any time if I've forgotten anything. In terms of Member Masipa's question around the wards, the Go George bus service covers 25 of the 28 wards, Member Masipa. Then in terms of Member Mare's questions around the profile of commuters, it's majority of the commuters profile, and I'll get the exact profiling for the member, but it's largely workers, followed by scholars, and then on grant days, obviously your SASSA recipients, there is, and we plan for those grant days, Member Mare. In terms of the slight drop in the satisfaction, the reason for that was as a result of safety and security, specifically at bus stops. And that is why we very specifically allow the roving unit to focus on what we have seen as certain hotspot areas, Member Mare. Then in terms of Member Brian's question around cooperation between the City of Cape Town and Go George. So we have quarterly engagements called by the National Department of Transport, where all operating cities participate. And that's largely where the engagements happen. It also does happen at the Intermodal Planning Committee established by the City of Cape Town, where we benchmark and discuss just what's working and what's not from an IPTN perspective. Then in terms of Member Nkondlo's question around what's happening next in terms of the private sector participation. So the National Land Transport Act says that we could have negotiated this particular contract once off with the existing affected operators in an area. So we've done that. We are in the 11th year of the 12-year contract. We have to put out a tender according to law for 7 years. So by December 2026, we must have awarded a new contract, and that is open to every operator that is able to meet the specification. So we can't preempt the outcome of that tender process, but it will happen in next year. Is there an evaluation of the progress? So the National Department of Transport specifically evaluates all operating cities on a yearly basis. We have to give monthly stats as well as quarterly reports on our performance. I must highlight that the demand for the service has far exceeded our planning. So it's a pleasant surprise. It's a good outcome. We have also extended the routes. We engage communities, Member Nkondlo, through the integrated transport planning process that municipalities do. They're meant to do an update yearly and a complete overall every 5 years of the ITP. And that is largely when we do the community engagements, but we also have specific engagements with different wards impacted by service change, by infrastructure development. So there's lots of community participation in that space. Then from a minibus taxi and what we're seeing across the country, we liaise regularly with UNEDO because they are the one association in George where there are still licensed operators outside of the system that's legal. And that's why we engage them from a coexistence. How does the taxi industry coexist with a scheduled bus service? We have developed what we call a coexistence plan, which we are hoping to formalize and finalize in the very near future. Then lastly, Chairperson, in terms of Member Pietrus's follow-up, why is there no CEO? In terms of the contract that was signed, the CEO is only meant to be appointed once all phases of the services rolled out, and we have not rolled out all of the services. There is a board that is operational, and they can elect whether to not appoint the CEO, as well as the independent directors. The company is audited on a yearly basis. We receive the audited reports. So from a management perspective, we are very comfortable. And then also, you know that there is special general meetings that the VOC has, as well as the annual AGM, where these board members are elected and there is engagement around these appointments. And from what we have seen in terms of minutes, redacted minutes, because it is a private company, is that there has been no issue identified in the space, Member Pietrus. I think I've covered all the questions, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rivenar. I see Mr. Collins, his hand is up. You go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think I just wanted to add maybe a little bit of bit more meat to the question from Member Marais. Member Marais, we do, as part of the survey that we do on a yearly basis, we do deal with the issue of the demographics, and we can send that through to the committee, but just by way of high level feedback at the moment. The usage from a gender perspective, we at about 70% usage by females of the service, and just under 30%, around about 30% usage by males in terms of the service member. Then I think the last one, in terms of the last surveys that we've done, one of the questions that was posed to the participants was whether they have an income or not. And about 70% of the participants in that survey also indicated that they do have a active income. I think lastly, the chairperson, I maybe just want to add that we see that the majority, about 38% of passengers are between the ages, for example, of 35 and 35, and they are by far the majority of people traveling for purposes of work. So that is a high-level feedback, chairperson, and we can certainly provide more detail if so required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Minister Seleko, I see you on the platform. I don't know if you have any comments, and possibly at the same time just to wrap up, because I think we've now come to the end of this presentation and the questions there. So any closing remarks from yourselves?
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations on your election as the chair of this committee, and to the honourable members. Chair, I think what the presentation was clear in terms of how far we have travelled from the inception to where we are today. And I think what is important also is that the economic benefits are not only for the drivers, but for everybody that is involved in Go George, has actually done a lot in making sure that people are able to put food on their table. And I was very fortunate to spend some time last week in George, speaking to everybody that benefits by using Go George. And I must say, I think that one of the questions was that, the demographics of people that actually benefit from this particular transport, and Go George is one of the public transport that is wheelchair friendly. And when you go inside, there is dedicated seats for people with disabilities. So you make provision for everyone. And, I've spoken to a lot of people across race, across gender, across culture in terms of the benefit that Go George brings. And the question that I was posing was that what would happen to them if Go George would not exist tomorrow? And I must say, Chair, they would say, no, our life is going to be compromised. We are no longer going to be able to access, Go George, to be able to go to work, go to the clinics, and be able to go to school. And also, what is important about Go George, I think Ricardo mentioned that if you use a ticket of Go George, within an hour, you can use the same ticket to get to town, do what you want to do within that particular hour, still use the same ticket and take you back. And I think that's one of the benefits that I would want to appreciate about Go George. And also, whenever you render such a beautiful service, everybody and in every area would want to have, access to it. And I must say, Chair, we are working very hard in making sure that whatever plans we have put in place, that we are able to implement those plans, because we know there is this request from Thembaletu to say, when are you coming? When is Go George going to take us to the mall? When is Go George going to take us to the CBD? But also, and trying to work with the other mode of transport so that we avoid what was happening in Maponya Mall. So those are the kind of things that we are actually planning, and we are saying, how does one make sure that the different modes of transport are able to complement one another instead of competing with one another? Because what we have seen in August 2023, it's something that we don't want to relive again, Chair. And whenever we see scenes like in Maponya, we get sleepless nights because we are worried about our commuters because they might be caught in the crossfire. Chair, with those few words, I would just want to say thank you very much for the questions, and to the colleagues that have actually, complimented and congratulated the department in terms of what they have done on this particular a project, which is Go George, and hopefully we can, have similar Go George in other areas, specifically in non-metro areas like your Beaufort West and your West Coast. We would want to see such, because ultimately mobility, is the engine of our economy. So if mobility does not work, people are not able to access work, go to school and be able to go to get healthcare services. So from my side, Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to share what you are doing from the side of mobility, and to the colleagues, the whole team from the HOD, the chief directors and directors, for the work that they have done for the last 11 years. Thank you very much, Chair, and to the honorable members.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much to the team from Mobility that deals with the Go George bus service, and to the members. I think that then concludes the presentation on the Go George bus service, and you are now welcome to exit the meeting. And as I think as speakers have indicated, thanks very much for the presentation. I think that was most worthwhile, and along with the engagement, the questions and the answers that we have received. We will now be able to move on to the second part of our agenda with a presentation from the Fiscal and Finance Commission. And I hope that all of your orders for tea, coffee and scones are on their way, because it's just after 10 o'clock. So I think I'm just going to look across to Mr. Davids, the procedural officer, if he can indicate to us whether the team from the Fiscal and Finance Commission are ready. And I think immediately apologize to them for having to wait this while for the start of their presentation.
Honorable Chairperson, through you, I see Dr. Mbava is the chairperson of the FFC, is in the meeting, Chairperson, and her team.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think on behalf of the Budget Committee and the honourable members present, and there are quite a good few members that are chairs of the various standing committees within the cluster, are or were invited, and I've seen them on the platform. So that would then also include the chairs of agriculture, on the environment, on finance, infrastructure, mobility and local government. All of those chairs have been invited to attend this member of the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee also, just for purposes of record, is constituted by the chairs of all of the committees within the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, and are therefore welcome to attend this meeting. I also notice there are some chairs from the social cluster, which would then include education, health, the social development, the police oversight committee, culture affairs and sport, and the Premier's and Constitutional Committee. So I think I would then like to hand over to the chair of the FFC, just to introduce yourself there, and then we can start with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and good morning to yourself, Chairperson, and good morning to all the honourable members of the committee and any other support staff on the committee. My name is Dr. Mbava. I am the chairperson of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. Chair, I am also accompanied by my research team, who will assist me with their presentation. Chair, it's a great pleasure for us to be here today to the Western Cape legislature. It's an honor to address you today on behalf of the Financial and Fiscal Commission. As an independent constitutional institution, our fundamental objective is to provide you as members of the legislature with evidence-based analysis that empowers you to effectively scrutinize national proposals in the budget process, to advocate as well for the Western Cape's fiscal needs, and formulate a robust, data-driven official response from the Western Cape on the division of revenue. So this briefing is designed from our perspective to arm you for effective advocacy, promote equity and fairness, and also enhance transparency and fiscal capacity of the province, and also the provincial needs when it comes to the budget process. So, Chair, today our submission is going to cover various issues. We'll look at climate change issues, public-private partnerships on infrastructure. We'll look at municipalities that hung municipalities and how they have performed. We'll also look at various issues on the coalition-led municipalities and also fiscal urban pressures as well, and how these affect the Western Cape. And then after that, we'll engage and get areas of clarity. So I'll ask Chen to just come in, Chen, and just take the members through the presentation, and then I'll come in later. Thanks. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Honourable Chair and members of the Budget Committee of the Western Cape Legislature. My name is Chen Sen, Head of Research at the Financial and Fiscal Commission. As my chairperson had already expressed, is that in terms of the Constitution, our role as the Financial and Fiscal Commission to the legislature is to effectively answer what earlier some of the honourable members asked earlier, is about the empirical evidence based and driven decision making and implementation thereof. And specifically, we address on the issue of divisional revenue. I should mention quite clearly that from the perspective and in terms of the Constitution and the relevant legislation, divisional revenue does not only deal with divisional revenue bill. It deals with divisional revenue as in its entirety. In other words, the budget. So maybe to contextualize it properly and interestingly, from what we've experienced recently, is that we were many times asked, and particularly this year, when does the budget process start? And in fact, it starts with this submission, Honourable Chair members. It starts starts the 10 months before the budget of 2026, in this case, where we are now. And that we ought to armed you, as my chairperson said, with our recommendations, which is all based on research evidence. And so to start with that, our socio-economic profile, looking at that, is that South Africa is quite large, actually, geographically speaking, as well as diverse in terms of its population distribution. And that also relates, therefore, also, to its culture in terms of the provinces, and notably also in terms of its local governments and municipalities. Just to cast our eyes over this table, is that Western Cape is actually one of the highest, if not the highest, actually, fastest growing population province in the country. And that comes with its various implications, both on the first from the economic and also the household and individual consumers' perspective, emanating and also impacting on the fiscal economic environments and or outcome because with people comes with activities, comes with the necessity of consumption, and with that, it generates economic activities. Next slide, please. Just to look immediately, as it is the South Africa's #1 issue in sort of 3 parts: the poverty, inequality, and unemployment. In terms of the Western Cape, it actually is quite well positioned in terms of its economic status. In that, here, if I may draw your attention to the far right column, is that 4.1 for the Western Cape. What that means is that for every 1 unemployed individual, there are roughly a little bit more than 4 individuals that are employed. In other words, out of, say, 5 people, there is about just four of them are employed and 1 of them unemployed. And that you can see, compared to other provinces, that the Western Cape has slightly lesser of a burden, and it's also embedded, supported by its strong economic foundation in terms of this employed to unemployed ratio. Next slide, please. As perhaps, and we do agree in terms of our research and outcome, is that mobility, or more specifically the infrastructure of logistics, is actually the blood, the blood vessels, or of the economic body of South Africa, and that without mobility, that economy can't move, essentially. And so we looked at the SANRAL paved road conditions, and one can see that Western Cape, in that it's sort of got these 3 major lines that runs around the north and towards the east, as earlier, therefore connecting towards the George area. And the general conditions of these major roads as under the SANRAL's jurisdictions are relatively manageable, but it has to be continuously maintained. If one casts our eyes just further to the north, as you can see, there are quite a few red lines, and also towards the Eastern Cape side. And so it is more imperative for the Western Cape province to look at this map in not just within the borders of the Western Cape, but also that these roads are connected. So has to be mindful of how to maintain, and if not support, the maintenance and repairs of these major roads. Next slide, please. I'm going to therefore hand over to my team to take you over the presentation that is our submission of 26-27. Over to you, Jenny, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members. My name is Jenny Deledone, and before going to Chapter 1, I just want to briefly finish the contextual analysis, looking at some of the socioeconomic profile of the Western Cape economy. All we note on this slide is that the 4 major industries driving growth in the province are finance, by far contributing the most at 26%, followed by manufacturing, trade, and personal services. And the figure also on the right-hand side shows significant in-migration patterns in the province. Here, in terms of human development, the socioeconomic profile and human development indicators, very briefly, they do show some improvement in the province. However, we do note some variations across districts, and we do note that poverty remains a significant challenge in the province. In terms of access to basic services, the province generally fares quite well. However, major concern remains to be access to housing, as there is a high prevalence of informal dwellings in the province. Summarizing some of the key challenges, most have already been mentioned here. Maybe an additional point to mention are just reiterating high levels of inequality, high incidence of crime in Cape Town Metro specifically. as well as the poor quality of Cape Town's logistics and port infrastructure, which was ranked the worst performing by global standards. Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members, I'll talk you through Chapter 1 of the FFC's annual submission on the division of revenue, focusing on the macroeconomic consequences of climate change and sectoral interdependency in the South African economy. This chapter has two aims. Firstly, it seeks to examine the macroeconomic effects of climate change with a focus on economic growth outcomes and fiscal consequences across African countries. Secondly, it examines the sectoral interdependencies to identify sectors in the South African economy that are more vulnerable to climate-induced shocks. The research is for noting purposes, honourable members. Moving to the findings of this chapter, in terms of the climate policy, I'd just like to highlight one policy on the slide, which is a more recent development in 2019, was the adoption of the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. And this policy is highlighted because it envisaged numerous funding sources to combat climate change through adaptation strategies. And one of the funding sources that is highlighted is direct allocations from the national budget, followed by public intermediaries and the private sector. And of course, we know some recent developments such as the Just Transition Framework and the Climate Change Act, which solidified the government's commitments. Moving to the trend analysis, when we move to the findings from the trend analysis, what we show is not only this positive correlation between greenhouse gases and climate change in terms of rising global temperatures that are shown in this slide. On the following slide, we also show that carbon emissions are highly concentrated in certain countries and across global regions. So, for example, China's carbon emissions grew at a markedly higher rate than in the USA and the sub-Saharan African region. And important to note is that some regions, such as sub-Saharan Africa, emit much smaller volumes of emissions in absolute terms, contributing much less to the global carbon emissions that we see. And this is critical to take into account, especially when we consider the regional costs of natural disasters on this slide, which then shows that the regional costs of natural disasters do not necessarily correspond with those regions where CO2 emissions are more concentrated. And essentially, this illustrates the unequal and disproportionate impact of climate change. Moving to the model that was run on the climate change fiscal effects on African economy, here the impact of climate change on economic growth and the fiscus, the evidence shows that there is indeed a negative relationship between extreme weather events and GDP. And in terms of the fiscal impact of climate change, the results should suggest that a temperature increase will negatively impact the budget balance. And what this highlights, honourable members, is that climate change poses a significant fiscal risk, and this emphasizes the need for proactive measures to be taken in terms of strengthening fiscal stability. Then this slide briefly contextualizes climate change in South Africa, showing the general rise in temperature increases since 1950. But moving on to the findings on identifying vulnerable sectors to climate change in the South African economy. The analysis conducted estimated the impact of a climate-induced agricultural shock on different sectors of the economy, which then gives us an indication of which sectors are most vulnerable. The 20 most vulnerable industries were captured in the table here on the slide. However, in the following slide, I'll briefly discuss just these top 5 industries. So first, we have the petroleum products as well as fertilizer products. So the results suggest that for these products in industries, these are more sensitive to climate shocks such as drought that cause a loss in agricultural output. And this highlights a sectoral interdependence and a degree of vulnerability, primarily because these products are inputs and intermediate inputs in agricultural production processes. Furthermore, we have the freight and transport sector, as well as the mining sector, which also showed some strong production linkages to agriculture, highlighting some of the nuanced impacts that climate change can have on the economy. And interestingly and importantly, the financial sector, because it's one of the most largest contributors to GDP and in the province, this sector was shown also to have significant indirect linkages with an agricultural output shock induced by climate change, which makes it more vulnerable to such shocks in the economy. Honourable members, to take you through the recommendations, the first recommendation speaks to the need for coordinated efforts to be made with international role players in order to strengthen international climate funding based on the principles of fairness. And this is based on this disproportionate impact versus how much carbon emissions are being emitted regionally and globally. Secondly, given the adverse impact that climate change can have on the fiscus, it is strongly recommended that fiscal credibility be restored to enhance budget resilience to minimize fiscal risks associated with climate change. It is further recommended that deregulation be considered in sectors that are more vulnerable to climate-induced shocks to reduce the risk of supply chain inefficiencies, which could then exacerbate the knock-on effects of climate change. In terms of the climate change policy framework, mitigation and adaptation responses need to be clearly defined and measurable and spearheaded by the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in collaboration with the Presidential Climate Commission. And then finally, it's recommended that a clear approach be adopted on how to develop climate resilient infrastructure across various ministries, including the Ministry of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in conjunction with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure and of Trade and Industry. Honourable members, thank you. I'll move to the next chapter and hand over to my colleague. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gianni. Good morning, Chair and honourable members of the committee. My name is Fabrice Katobiege, and I'll take you through to Chapter 2 of our submission, which focused on infrastructure and its impact on economic growth, as well as the role that public-private partnerships have to play in this regard. So the reason we chose to look at this particular focus area was that national government is embarking on an infrastructure-led growth path to stimulate economic activity and productivity. However, fiscal constraints, weak economic growth and rising debt levels have constrained the ability of the government to effectively invest in infrastructure. Now, as we've seen globally, public-private partnerships have provided governments under fiscal pressure a tool to which they can use to help deliver infrastructure with public sector support. In the case of South Africa, the PPP model has been embraced since the late 1980s. However, what has been noticed is that the uptake of PPPs, if you look at in terms of transaction value, has seen a marked decline. So that's dropped from 10.7 billion in the 2011-2012 financial year to 7.1 billion in 22-23 financial year, according to data from the National Treasury. Now, the need to rope in the private sector to help with infrastructure and the delivery of public infrastructure was something that was highlighted by the Minister of Finance in his budget speech in the beginning of the year, as well as also last year as well. And so we focused on looking at how do we reignite infrastructure's role in growth while also strengthening the role that public-private partnerships have to play in this regard. Moving on, this slide just quickly touches on the methodology that we employed when answering this question. So we employed a mixed methods approach, utilizing both qualitative and quantitative techniques. If we move on to the first slide, just shows the first findings of our econometric analysis. Now, this focused on the role that infrastructure has when it comes to stimulating economic growth, and what was found through our modeling exercises that health, electricity, and water infrastructure all contributed positively to growth, So water infrastructure in particular supports agriculture, manufacturing, and services, while as one may know, electricity enables things like digitalization and industrial productivity. What was interesting to note that came out of this modeling exercise was that education infrastructure showed a negative contribution to economic growth. Now, while this does not necessarily mean that one should not invest in education infrastructure, it does highlight that there may be issues outside of infrastructure itself that led to this negative finding. So this could mean that the structural inefficiencies within the education system itself are not translating into the economic dividends that one would expect when making investments into infrastructure. Moving on to the next finding. Now, this was the result of a desktop exercise that we conducted that looked at the South Africa's PPP framework environment. Now, what we found is that PPPs, when specifically looking at National Treasury Regulation 16, is that PPPs are not that well defined. So what we mean by this is that this piece of regulation doesn't clearly separate PPPs from traditional procurement. Now, what this results in is that the government can actually end up holding more risk than is actually intended under the concept of a PPP. So this raises the question and highlights really the need for strengthening the PPP framework to help motivate and improve private sector participation within for its role in the delivery of public infrastructure. The next slide looked at the findings that emanated from our quantitative exercise when it comes to public infrastructure investment trends. Now, looking at National Treasury data, what we found is that between 2013 and 2023, sub-national governments, so that's provinces and municipalities, contributed the most to South Africa's total public infrastructure spend. So that was at 1.1 trillion, or about almost half of the public infrastructure spend. Whereas when you look at PPPs, that only accounted for 50 billion rand, or just 2.2% of the total public infrastructure spending over the same time period. Now, looking forward and over the MTEF period, what one sees is that PPPs are expected to remain just a small fraction of the total public infrastructure spending, as at around 2%. Now, what this really highlights is that there is room for scaling up PPPs to help bridge the funding gap when it comes to infrastructure investments in the country. The next finding, again, was a quantitative exercise that looked at private infrastructure investment trends. And what we did here was look at South Africa compared to its BRICS counterparts. And what we found is that between 2013 and 2023, investment was usually below 1.5 billion US dollars per year in South Africa, with a peak of 4.3 billion US dollars in 2018. By contrast, you see vast differences when it comes to other BRICS countries. So, for example, in China, we found that investment totaled 40.4 billion US dollars in 2023, and Brazil and India also maintain far stronger levels of private infrastructure and participation when it comes to the investments in infrastructure when compared to South Africa. So this really highlights the need for South Africa to look at how to enable a more investor-friendly environment that offers clear regulatory certainty, real risk sharing, and better incentives for private capital to help address the funding gap when it comes to infrastructure. The next finding relates to our assessment of contingent liabilities. Now here what we found is that national and provincial departments, as the main contracting parties, often carry the financial burden when government defaults on PPP obligations. So this exposes the fiscus to high termination risks. So what this means is that there's, again, looking at the risk sharing part of the PPP, is enough being done to really shield the government and the private sector from certain fiscal risks that could emanate from these PPPs? Is the risk sharing adequate or structured correctly to make sure that the private sector also holds its fair share of weight when it comes to these PPP contracts? The next finding emanates from our desktop exercise that we conducted through literature review and the case studies that we looked at. So firstly, we looked at, on the domestic front, case studies across economic and social infrastructure. And really the key lessons here when it comes to making PPPs successful, infrastructure PPPs successful, is that there's a need for clear competitive bidding process, again, clear risk allocation. It's also important for communication, transparent communication to stakeholders, and to ensure stakeholder buy-in to ensure that these PPPs can be successful. And another key important issue was to ensure that there's, at the onset of the PPPs, that there's really realistic scope setting and financial discipline to ensure that these projects can be successful. We also looked at PPP case studies abroad. And this next slide highlights the 3 countries that we looked at. So that was Canada, Chile, and Kenya. And really the key lessons from these 3 countries was that it's important to have clear regulations in place to support the private sector to get involved in the PPPs. We also need strong institutional capacity, if you look at the likes of what Canada has done. And also innovative financing can be important when structuring the PPPs. So that's in the case of Chile, where they've employed an asset recycling model where the proceeds from one infrastructure asset goes to help fund the new infrastructure project. So that reduces the reliance on debt and also helps to enhance the sustainability of the project. Chair and honourable members, it brings me to the final slide that highlights the recommendations emanating from this chapter. So firstly, the Commission recommends that infrastructure development should be prioritised on high impact sectors, so specifically looking at water and energy. The second recommendation the Commission makes is that the Minister of Finance, together with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, should look to create a clear, unified framework that defines PPPs distinctly from traditional procurement and clarifies risk-sharing rules. And then the final recommendation that the Commission makes is that the Minister of Finance, along with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, should ensure PPP agreements have fair and enforceable risk allocations to protect both the government and the private partners, while also helping to reduce contingent liabilities. Through you, Chair, I'll hand over to my colleague to take us through the next chapter. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, Fabrice. Good morning, Chair and honourable members. I will be taking you through Chapter 3 of our submission, focusing on the strengthening subnational government's contribution to infrastructure-led growth in South Africa. Next slide, please. In acknowledging the significance of infrastructure investment to economic growth and its role in bringing forth wider developmental benefits like reducing inequality, alleviating poverty, and promoting environmental sustainability, we embarked on a research to examine whether infrastructure-led growth is being realized, particularly at the subnational level of government. Next slide, please. So, this on the methodology part, Chair, will just present it for noting purposes. The next slide, please. So jumping straight into our findings. Here, our findings highlight the state of public infrastructure investment on service delivery access, and we note that the results paint a mixed picture across different provinces. So what is key to note here, Chair and honourable members, is that while public infrastructure investment has improved service delivery access, progress remains uneven, whereby some provinces are advancing rapidly while others continue to face structural challenges that require more targeted interventions. Next slide, please. Continuing with our findings, on slide 4 and 5 combined, our findings hone in on the grant incentive component, particularly focusing on the health facility revitalization grant and the education infrastructure grant. The analysis shows that there is no clear correlation between the incentive allocation and the average provincial scores. The incentive component is therefore standardized, whereby the province that scores the highest on the assessment receives the same allocation as the province that has just barely met the minimum requirements. Overall, what we would like to emphasize here is that these grants are not effectively incentivizing improved performance, as the allocations do not directly correspond to the provincial scores, therefore raising concerns around the entire incentive approach. Next slide, please. We now shift our focus to the grant spending performance, starting with the public transport network grant. The analysis shows that the grants allocation has fluctuated over the years before experiencing a significant decline in 2020-21. While spending performance showed improvements, however, it is still below the full achievement. This consistently low spending performance is a clear indicator of ongoing challenges with funds absorption and the efficiency of project implementation at the local government level. Overall, what we highlight here is that a substantial portion of allocated funds are not being spent, which hinders the intended development of public transport infrastructure. Next slide, please. To continue with the grant spending performance, here we focused on the integrated urban development grant. So altogether, the analysis shows significant gaps between allocated funds and the funds actually spent. So the significant gap indicates major challenges in budget utilization, whereas the low spending performance suggests a persistent issue with municipalities' ability to absorb the allocated funds and efficiently implement urban development projects. Next slide, please. On this slide, Chair and Honorable Members, our findings are with regards to the subnational coordination in infrastructure development, which we know that is a critical aspect for effective service delivery. First, we note that South Africa has made significant strides in improving infrastructure development coordination. And the table, we will see that the table on the right provides details on these interventions, including when they were initiated and also their respective objectives, such as building sustainable capacity and transforming the economic landscape. However, despite these national level efforts, the absence of a similar single window for infrastructure coordination at the subnational government level, specifically within provinces and municipalities, is a presiding concern, given that these entities are directly responsible for most service delivery. So in essence, we highlight that while national coordination is improving, the effectiveness of infrastructure development at the local level is hampered by lack of cohesive integrated planning and execution. Next slide, please. So, Chair and Honorable Members, this brings us finally to the recommendations that emanated from our research. So firstly, the Commission recommends the establishment of a subnational infrastructure coordination framework. The Commission is of the view that this framework will be a crucial step in streamlining infrastructure development at the provincial and municipal levels, thereby reducing fragmented planning, duplicated efforts, and inefficient resource allocation. Furthermore, this would be in a single window of coordination. Secondly, the Commission recommends the introduction of a performance-linked feedback mechanism in all provincial and municipal incentive grants. The Commission is of the view that this mechanism would create a direct and transparent link between a province or municipality's performance and the funding they receive. Furthermore, this will ensure that grants operate as a true incentive, rewarding improved performance and encouraging accountability. This will also strengthen the link between infrastructure performance and funding allocation. Chair and Honorable Members, I will hand over to my colleague Sabelo to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neo. Good morning To honorable members, good morning to the chairperson and all other colleagues present on the platform. I'll take you through chapter 4, which is on the assessment of the performance of the coalition-led municipalities. Next slide. Just as a form of an introduction here, introducing this this research, this focus, is just to note that the governance plays a key role in the provision of services by municipalities. Therefore, the functioning and the ability of municipalities to deliver these basic services is closely linked to the functioning of these municipal councils, which are in the form of the governance. That is, governance is key in the delivery of services. Then this research, recently what we've seen is that there's been an increasing trajectory of the collusion where municipalities do not have an outright party that has won or has acquired the majority vote. Then this leads to a hung council or to a form of governance where there will be a collusion of municipalities where they will have to collude to form a governance. And then this research, what we've seen recently is that there's an increasing trend of those municipalities that are under coalition government. Then this research seeks to assess the performance of the coalition-led municipalities in South Africa. And next slide. In terms of methodology, which I will not dwell much on, is that both the quantitative methodology has been used, and also the research also looked on the audit outcomes of the municipalities to get the actual evidence-based performance. Next slide. Just key to note that on methodology, that what we used here is just the provision of water as a measure, because when municipalities, they provide water, electricity, and other services. Then here for this study, we have used water, the provision of water between or before the 2021 local government election and after 2021 local government election, just to determine the performance of those municipalities. So here, what we see here is that with respect to the trends of the municipalities which are under hung council, this graph presents the overall trajectory of what has happened over the years since 2006 to 2021. What we see here is just an increasing trend if we focus on the total, that is far right, but we see here that there's been an increase in the total number of municipalities that are under this form of governments, which is the coalition. And you see the bar there, that is 2021, that has been increasing, trend has been increasing all the years. Then you see where we are in 2021. And the key to note here is that the graph also shows that for the Western Cape, you see between 2016 and 2021, that there's been that increase, which increases from 8 municipalities to 50 municipalities. And then this trend again, we think that it is gonna continue in the next government election, local government election. The next slide. So on our quantitative analysis, these are the results that we found from our research. Key to note here is that we have majority municipalities, that is post-2021, and we have majority and high municipalities, that is post-2021. And then what we see here, we have in-yards, that is the word that is provided in yard. Then you see that these municipalities that are under hung council, they perform better than municipalities that are under majority. Then here the focus, we can just concentrate on that inner cycle, which is a small inner cycle in that. We see that the inner cycle for hung council is higher than the cycle for majority, for municipalities under majority. And then again, even on the total here includes all all the water that has been provided within the yard and within 200 meters and over 200 meters from the yard. Then in both instances, we see that the Hang Council, they perform better than the majority council or majority-led municipalities. But here, key to note is that there is a high level of risk or uncertainty with respect to those municipalities that are under Hang Council, because you see the line, the bar that we have under Hang Council is taller than the bar that we have under the majority led municipalities. So here in essence is that this finding, in summary, it tells us that there is a higher performance in the municipalities under Hang Council, but there's a high risk that is there in these municipalities. Next slide. So here is just to emphasize the point again, using the standard deviation, showing the wide variation now and the risk with respect to Hang Council, though they perform better, but the risk is high. Then the question here is whether how do we influence the political voters? It's difficult for us, for the government, to influence political voters because it's their choice. They choose to vote for political parties, and then in the process, and then Hang Council, they are being established. But here we see that they perform better, but there's that high risk of uncertainty. The next slide. So this slide compares the audit outcomes in both categories, that is Hang Council municipalities and municipalities with a majority councils. Key to note here is that on progress, on the three instances, that is improved, unchanged, and regressed. So we used those to check how these two categories of municipalities perform. Then on improved outcomes, then what we've seen here is that 17% of municipalities that are with Hang Council have improved. That is improvement of 17%, whereas it's 14% for municipalities with majority-led councils. And then, whereas with respect to unchanged audit outcomes, we've got 72% of municipalities with majority-led council that did not improve, compared to 61% of municipalities with Hang Council that have not changed. And then lastly, on the regressed ones, we've got 21% of municipalities under coalition-led municipalities that have shown worsening audit outcomes compared to 14% of municipalities with under municipal-led council that have regressed. Last slide. So here, in the form of a recommendation that we were making out of this chapter, is that the Provincial Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and SALGA, South African Local Government Association, should identify those key challenges, because we've seen that there's a high risk in Hang Council, but they perform better, but there's a higher risk. Those key challenges and risks associated with Hang Councils, particularly in terms of capabilities and performance of basic services. And this is key, honorable members and honorable chairperson, because with this increasing trajectory of Hang Council that we are seeing of late, it's likely that we will see it continuing even in our next local government election, which is next year. Then identifying these and dealing with these challenges then would play a key role in addressing all those challenges and risks associated with this. On that note, let me hand over to Nosisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabelo. Good morning, Honorable Chair, members and the officials present. My name is Nosisa Kwama, and I will be taking you through the last chapter of the submission, which is about the fiscal pressures of urbanization. A brief overview of the chapter. Urbanization in South Africa has accelerated significantly, rising from 57% in 1994 to nearly 69% in 2023. This demographic shift places immense pressure on metropolitan and secondary cities, which must expand infrastructure and basic services at a pace that matches the population growth. While urbanization is often linked to economic opportunity and improved living standards, it also introduces complex fiscal and service delivery challenges, particularly in provinces where rapid immigration meets limited municipal capacity. Given the increasing rate of urbanization and service delivery pressures in most urban municipalities, this study investigates the impact of urbanization on service delivery to understand how metros and other urban centers are coping with expanding service delivery mandates arising from urbanization. Next slide, please. Moving to the findings, while metros such as Johannesburg and Cape Town have successfully translated urban population growth into job creation, the findings are below on the graph below shows that there is a strong correlation between population growth and unemployment in the 8 metros. The city of Tshwane appears to be the only outlier with population growth outpacing job creation. Cape Town specifically shows high population growth and moderate unemployment growth. This suggests some success in job creation, but not sufficient to keep pace with the urbanization. Next slide, please. In South Africa, secondary cities, which are increasingly absorbing migration spillovers from overburdened metros, the correlation between population growth and employment creation is more mixed and in some cases worryingly negative. Secondary cities that have managed to convert demographic growth into job creation are Polokwane and Rustenburg. And municipalities such as Mbombela reflect a severe mismatch with population growth far outpacing formal employment expansion. Next slide, please. Municipalities have made visible progress in keeping pace with water demand. For instance, piped water connections have grown in parallel with household expansion in many metros. While overall access remains high, the gap between demand and service capacity is narrowing. Increasing risk of service delivery challenges, targeted infrastructure investments are critical to prevent service drain. Next slide, please. If we look at the data comparing from 2001 until 2022, the overall trend in the accessibility of electricity has shifted positively as the number of households without electricity access decreased by 66% over the last 2 decades. This reduction demonstrates the impact of targeted electrification programs such as the Integrated National Electrification Program and Free Basic Electricity. In metropolitan municipalities, the number of unconnected households declined by 43%, while secondary cities achieved a 46% reduction. Notably, the largest improvement occurred outside metros where access gaps were reduced by 73%. While these figures reflect success, they also highlight that over 1 million households particularly remain without electricity, pointing to persistent service delivery gaps in dense urban and informal areas. Next slide, please. Despite targeted programs like the Informal Settlement Upgrading Program, informal housing remained persistent. Nationally, households in informal dwellings increased by over 80,000 between 2001 and 2022. While metros saw slight improvements, informal settlements grew significantly in non-metro areas by 15%. This trend is noticeable in big metros such as Cape Town, where informal settlement emerged faster than formal housing delivered. This disconnect between policy and special realities hampers service delivery and limits the effectiveness of municipal planning. Next slide, please. Then, to determine the impact of urbanization on service delivery, the panel fixed effect model was used. The results reveals that for every 1% increase in urban population, there is a 1.42 increase in access to basic services. This suggests municipalities are expanding service delivery faster than the population growth, which is a positive outcome. If we look at some of the variables, the Gini coefficient has a large negative effect, showing that inequality is a major barrier to stable and equitable service delivery. Inequality is not just a social challenge, but it is a fiscal reality. Then if we look at the income is showing a strong positive effect, meaning higher income levels are associated with better access to basic needs. While expenditure is statistically significant, its negative coefficient suggests that simply increasing spending does not guarantee better access. In essence, while urbanization expands access to basic services, deepening socio-economic disparities reduces municipalities' ability to sustain these services. This suggests that service delivery improvements must be accompanied by inclusive economic growth to fiscally sustainable. The last slide, please. To address these challenges, the Commission recommends the following. Firstly, the Commission reiterates its recommendation from the 2018-19 submission on the division of revenue that the Finance Minister should create an awareness of the land value capture fiscal instrument among the large cities and extend the scope of financial management grant to cater for capacity building in the design and implementation of land value capture mechanism. Meaning that the idea is simple. When government invests in infrastructure, the value of the nearby land goes up. If municipalities capture part of this increase, it becomes a powerful source of revenue to fund more services. Moving to the second recommendation, the Commission recommended that the Minister of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, in conjunction with the Finance Minister, must prioritize the review of the local government equitable share formula to account for urban growth, rising costs of service delivery, and the unique challenges faced by the urban municipalities. We know that metros are the engine of South Africa's economy, accounting for about 47% of the country's GDP. However, their budgets are under pressure because of the population is growing quickly. The funding model needs to adapt so that it supports the unique challenges each municipality faces, while also covering the rising cost of providing basic services like water, electricity, and housing. Lastly, the Commission recommends that municipality councils should introduce innovative ways for their municipalities to generate revenue. This can be done through the modernization of the property tax collection system, through digital valuation and automated billing. Meaning, as cities grow, The costs rise, but the revenues often do not keep up. To ease the pressure from rapid population growth, municipalities must expand their revenue base in line with urbanization. Otherwise, they will struggle to provide the services citizens expect. I will pause here, honorable members, and I will hand over to my chairperson for closing remarks and way forward. Thank you.
So in conclusion, honorable members, these are the recommendations that we are making to yourselves in terms of budget 2026. So in terms of the legislation, we must give you those recommendations 10 months before so you can consider them. How do you do that? So we recommend that now the legislature must debate the FFC's findings and recommendations and use these recommendations to inform your negotiating mandates as a province. When you now go to the National Council of Provinces, as the province, you will use the FFC's recommendation to strengthen your case. And also as well, you will use the FFC's recommendations when you engage with National Treasury, when it comes to engaging Treasury in terms of making any adjustments to the provincial budgets. Finally, you'll also use these recommendations on your final negotiating mandate with the National Council of Provinces. And that is our role as FFC, to empower you as a province, to give you the evidence, to give you the analysis, to give you the information that you can use to strengthen your provincial position when it comes to the budget of the Western Cape. Thank you so much, Chairperson. I now hand over to you. We will engage you with any areas of clarification or questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, Dr. Mbaba. That was certainly a most enlightening and interesting presentation that you provided us in terms of an overview of the various circumstances, conditions, and situation that we find ourselves in. And I think these comments are certainly valued in terms of assisting to guide the whole budget approach. And as you indicated, those various negotiations that need to take place between ourselves as a legislature and at the national level. I am going to hand over to some questions. I see there are questions from the Honourable Members Masipa, then Bombo and Heron. So we'll take those first three questions and then we'll see whether we can deal with the fourth one. The fourth one I notice is from Member Nkondo. So you can go ahead, Member Masipa.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. Apologies. Chairperson, I think the presentation was quite insightful, but I must also say that the presentation was very long, and not to be able to follow throughout was a little hard. Maybe in future, this kind of presentation must probably be done in half so that, we can really engage thoroughly in some of the aspects before we move to the next stage. But I do just want to say that I support the view that we definitely need to have equitable share being looked at, to review it properly so that it can really reflect, challenges that we are facing as a province. But I think the question to that, Chair, is the question of whether the FFC have also engaged the national minister, especially the Treasury and the COCTA in this regard, because I do believe that's an engagement that needs to take place because as the presentation has indicated that Western Cape is seeing quite a big informal settlement as a result of, obviously, municipalities really getting the required funding to support, the human settlement part of the issue. The other question that I have got, Chair, just going through my notes quickly. So, Chair, I've seen that on one of the slides that talks about the socio-economic and infrastructure overview. The FFC mentions that finance is the dominant sector with 26% and manufacturing 15%, trade at 14%. I just want to get an understanding as to where does service sector fits in that in their work there, because I do believe that service is also playing a part. And what was very interesting was the point that was made with regards to port infrastructure. And I went back and I looked at the port infrastructure and the Port of Cape Town in terms of its performance, because it shows that even prior to 2024 release in terms of ranking, it did show that Port of Cape Town, I think it came third last with regards to its performance. So this definitely also affect the economic activities in the province as such. So I really just want to ask if obviously infrastructure support. I know that they really looking at provincial, national level coordinating province to make it really work. We are looking at devolution, if you want to call it that way, or even privatization. One of the two. Just ensure that at least the province has got some powers that it can use to capacitate and improve. Would that be one of the recommendations that they will also, support us in terms of maybe making that very, very strong recommendation? And I say this because, we have increased in terms of the NDP when it came out. We have worked around increasing the production from the agriculture side point of view, with the view of, expanding our increasing our foreign exchange revenue. But with the port's incapacity, really makes it very, very difficult, because the financial pressures on the farmers really they relied heavily on ensuring that we get revenue, but also to retain jobs on the farm. It's going to become very difficult if the port is not functioning. But obviously, with all the geopolitics and the trade wars that are taking place, it's a little bit difficult. But we appreciate the work that is being done to ensure that we get alternative markets. But I think to get the port working, it's going to really assist us quite a great deal. Chair, those are my inputs so far. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Member Masipa, for those comments. Member Mbombo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Hi, Doc. I think for me, what is crucial, it's about, because as we know that in the South African system, when it comes to the issues of the fiscal, or even the whole thing about the budgeting, it's a form of a cycle. So I think for us, it's about we shouldn't, as legislators, as you started in terms of bringing back in terms of what is our role in the triangle as a lawmakers, and also our input, because we wait until we get the fiscal framework. Oh, like I've read the MTAP, the framework from the National Treasury, and then I asked myself, how come that I was not part of this as a lawmaker in the province? I don't recall making an input on the MTAP document. And then when the minister is presenting the budget in terms of the specifically on the fiscal framework, and then followed by the DORA, and then appropriation. And then I ask myself, now I'm going to throw tantrums, yet they're supposed to be that I should have made an input as a provincial lawmaker. So why am I making a noise together with the ancestors who will have seen the process at the time that is being presented? So what we are presenting now is about noting it always happens, but it's because it's the first time that I'm a backbencher. So it's only now that I'm getting more of exactly our role. Just to make it an example, which is actually you are repeating what is in the MTEF in relation to the focusing on the infrastructure, on the energy, on the climate, and also on the primary goal, which is that also got me reminded of the FFC. It's about to advocate for the province and also to look in terms of the provincial equitable share. So there is an opportunity, and also to draft the well-reasoned, I'm quoting what your primary goal you have presented, a provincial position on the proposed national allocations. So it means now that we as a budget committee, and also even in other committees, before we make a noise, if there will be a noise, in the following year for the in-year budget, we should be able to look at it now continuously, and also probably keep on give us the guidance in terms of looking specifically around the equitable share. And on the issue of the climate, luckily, although the Climate Act was passed last year, so it's only, I think it's 2 sections out of 6 or 7 that now have been confirmed from March, that these are the ones that will be delivered. And in terms of the National Treasury, also as part of the MTEF in the fiscal framework, it does mention that there will be departments that will be prioritized for the climate change tagging. We want to know, because I have been asking for the Western Cape government, which department out of these they are part of the climate change tagging. It looks like that the responses that I'm receiving is about no one knows. But for us as legislators, because the fiscal framework prioritize the climate change, it means that we have to go deeper and get more from the executive, where exactly that you are doing, because you will be supposed to be getting some extra resources for climate change budget tagging. Similar with the issue of the energy and the energy infrastructure. Also, I've seen that you have prioritized a lot of the energy infrastructure. Again, understandable because of the just energy transmission also that has been passed. And plus also there is also some of the monies coming from the EU related to the energy. But for me, when I look again at the MTEF, was about that. It is at the expense of the health infrastructure and the education infrastructure. And then lastly, talking about all of those, you also talk about in terms of looking at the loans. For example, at the government, Western Cape, now they're dealing with the alternate models of funding and also of the borrowing. Actually, before even they will have presented, if we will have, I do know that this process starts around about May in terms of appraising the minister. By the time it comes to the provinces, you already have taken care of part of it. So the issue of the loans, we'll have wanted to hear even more from your side, because you're supposed to advise us, so that by the time we engage with the government, we already know exactly in terms of the borrowing, the loans, and also the issues related to the debt. Because even at the national level, it is there that we are servicing quite about, I'm not sure, 70 whatever percentage related to the debt. So for me, I thank for the presentation. I think for us now, through you, Chair, is about to internalize and look in terms of what is being proposed here. And then probably now for clarity, we can keep on maybe asking them further questions, so that by the time we engage with the department, which is in parallel to what we are supposed to, budgeting is many other issues. So probably going towards the 2026-27, we'll be able to ask relevant questions, because especially for the fiscal framework. Because by the time, which is true, I think you mentioned that, by the time the DORA comes in, we're supposed to have actually scrutinized the fiscal framework. Before we even go to the DORAs, by the time we go to the appropriation, it's already late. I think for me, I've been actually empowered in regard to this. Probably I've been ignoring it before, but now since I've been involved in the budgeting processes and also sharing out as part of the empowerment activities that I do for the other women. But thank you for that. But lastly, I saw that in the Act, they are in terms of who's supposed to be, I'm talking about the Fiscal Commission Act, that the members of the commission, they also should be a representation, I don't know whether that's the right word, but each and every executive council of the 9 provinces supposed to nominate a person that is supposed to be part of the commission. Who's the member here that has been nominated by the Western Cape in this regard? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Member Mbombo. I think what you've indicated there is, I think, in many ways, in encapsulating the work of this budget committee, because I think what is very clear that while the budget ultimately results in a set of numbers and a set of proposals, the underlying factors behind the budget have to be taken into consideration. And I think this is what the Fiscal and Finance Commission has come to us with today, in providing us with the greater, call it, canvas of all of the economic, environmental and climate factors and so forth that are affecting us and our environment, and that need to be taken into account. And these overall aspects are what I believe need to be looked at very closely in terms of the setting of the budget, of setting the objectives. And I mean, we as a province have set ourselves certain targets, certain objectives to achieve going into the future. And I think we need, from a budget committee point of view, then to interrogate whether we are on course to achieve those targets, and what needs to be altered, having taken into account what FFC is telling us. And I think FFC, along with the World Bank and various other international studies that get undertaken. So I think that certainly we look forward to comments from yourself. I think I will now move on then to Member Heron, and then to Member Bryant, and then we'll see whether we'll take Member Masipa still in this round, because he's having his second bite at the cherry now.
Thank you, Chair. Can I go?
Yes, you can go.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I want to go to the beginning of the presentation. I think 4 and 5 are there, where the FFC advises that their fundamental objective is to provide the legislature with independent evidence-based analysis and to help us build a strong case for fair and equitable share of the revenue backed by the FFC's findings, which is on slide 4, I think. And then slide 5, the secondary goals include to promote equity and fairness and ensure and demonstrate recommendations on objective criteria. And my question is really about the message that we keep getting from our provincial executive, that the Western Cape doesn't receive its fair share of the provincial equitable share. And their argument is based on receiving the fifth largest share in terms of provinces of the provincial equitable share, but where we have the third largest population. And I wonder if the FFC can tell us whether they have engaged with the executive around changes to the allocation to the Western Cape government in terms of provincial equitable share. And if those changes arise because the indicators that are being used to determine the provincial equitable share are, in the FFC view, wrong. In other words, we're measuring the wrong things in order to determine what the provincial equitable share should be, or whether the argument could be that the indicators are right, but the data that is applied against those indicators is wrong, and therefore the Western Cape is not receiving its fair share. So can we get a comment from the FFC about this argument about our fair share? And I just want to ask one other question, and that starts on slide 9, where the census data shows that the Western Cape's population in 2022 was about 7.4 million people. And then if you jump to slide, it's not numbered, but I guess it's about 3 or 4 down, the socioeconomic profile and infrastructure overview of the Western Cape. There's an indication there that the absolute number of people living below the lower bound poverty line has increased from 2013 to 2022 to nearly 3.7 million people. So is the FFC telling us that a population of about 7.4 million people, and that's 3.7 million, so half of the people in this province live below the lower bound poverty line? And if they are saying that, then how do we deal with the data on employment, which shows that the Western Cape has an unemployment rate of about 20%. It's gone up slightly in the most recent QLFS. But are we saying that people are, that there's an error in the employment data, or those who are employed are earning below the lower bound poverty line? How do we have 3.7 million, 50% of the people in this province living below the lower bound poverty line, when we have apparently the best employment rate in the province, in the country? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Heron. We're going to move on to Member Bryant, and then I know that Member Masipa has got another question that he has. Okay, Member Bryant.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I mean, thank you as well to all of the presenters. I think a lot of very, very interesting, comprehensive information that was provided. And I think it'll take more than a meeting to work our way through. And I've noted their recommendation that we debate their findings at some stage, and I'm sure that's something that would be considered. I have 2 questions. My first one is also in terms of the fair share discussion. And taking into account some of the factors that have been mentioned already by Member Heron, but also, the just significant growth in infrastructure, this immigration that's taking place, all of the other factors that are impacting the Western Cape at the moment and putting pressure, unfunded mandates, all of these other things that are being dealt with. Is there a formula, for instance, where one could type all of the factors in and it pops out on the other side what your fair share should be? Or is there a degree of ministerial determination involved in deciding which province gets which allocation? And if that is the case, is there a way to have oversight in terms of why a certain political decision is taken in terms of allocation? But if it is strictly a formula in terms of empirical data that is entered into a system and that pops out how much share of the budget you should get, is it possible to access that? And is there any more information around that? And then secondly, just in terms of the discussion around climate change, in terms of the Climate Change Act, there is a certain amount of responsibility that is now being placed on provinces in terms of putting in place regional climate action plans in cooperation with their municipalities. That is obviously going to cause some problems for some of these municipalities who don't have access to the human resources and financial resources in order to put these in place. Is this something that's being considered? I know the previous climate legislation was being considered, but is this something that is also being considered by the Commission? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Member Bryant. Member Masipa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies that I've forgotten this question. The question really relates to the recommendations that were made. Recommendation 1, I'm fine with it. Recommendation 2, I'm fine with it. Recommendation that I just want maybe the FFC to clarify is the recommendation 3. They talk about municipal councils should introduce innovative ways for their municipalities to generate revenue. The city of Cape Town has been taken to court by, I think, AfriForum regarding, obviously, the recently introduced budget. So I just want to see what are the typical examples that they would like to advise us as legislature, or obviously, the municipalities in terms of what kind of innovative approach of ensuring that we increase our revenue collection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa, for that. I think I'd like to hand over to the FFC, to Dr. Mbawa and her team then to respond to these initial questions and comments that have been given. I think so. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for the questions. Member Masipa, in terms of the consultation with the Minister, indeed, in terms of the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act, the Minister must also receive the same recommendations we are giving to you. So he will have received them as well. And at least 14 days before he tables the Division of Revenue Bill, he must consult with the Commission. So the Commission must sit with him, go through the recommendations, and then we have an engagement on the Division of Revenue Bill. So he does consult with the FFC. Honorable Mbombo, I think you've captured the budget process correctly. The fiscal framework, right? By the time you get to the fiscal framework, you should have, as a province, have gone through the recommendations and have a position. Because remember, the fiscal framework is the envelope that the Minister is proposing to say, this is how much money I'm going to spend, and this money is going to be sourced either from borrowing, from taxes, and so on and so forth. So you have indeed captured it very well. So in terms of the process, right, the appropriation is at the end, and then it's the DORA bill, second last, and then the first one is the fiscal framework. So it's important then for the province to have a position, a clear position as to what it wants in terms of its fiscal purse before the Minister tables the fiscal framework. And also, remember, in terms of the Constitution, the budget process is inclusive. It's a consultative process. The provinces must play a role in terms of informing the budget and the allocations. That is why they have to be consulted, because of cooperative governance. So the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act covers that. So if the provinces then do not actively take part in ensuring that the allocations which come to them are advocated for, then they are shortchanging themselves. And if the provinces do not take into account the recommendations of the FFC to them, to empower them, to ensure that their case is strong, they are shortchanging themselves. So what we want as the FFC is to ensure that all the provinces use the FFC's recommendations to argue for a specific position that will ensure that the province is able to meet its mandate in terms of basic services and serving the people of the province in line with the Constitution. Who is a member of the commission from the Western Cape? That discussion is between the Premier and the Minister of Finance. There is a process where there is a call for members of the commission from all the 9 provinces. And then it goes through a process where the Premier of the Western Cape will make a nomination, and then all the other premiers, and then they'll choose from that list and then appoint a commissioner. But there is a process. So the Western Cape, through the Premier, will engage the Minister of Finance to ensure that there is a representation from the province in the commission. Chen, if you can just come through on the other technical questions, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Following you, and thank you for the questions, Honourable Chair members. Following my chairperson's opening on, especially on the engagement, just perhaps one thing to note, and it's just something to also share with the legislature and as a branch of government, is that we should be, as an advice, we should be mindful of how the engagements are conducted. Specifically because when one, from the position of the, for instance, from a position of the Financial Fiscal Commission as a constitutional institution, when we engage with the executive branch of government, we need to keep it at a sensitive length to ensure that the power balance is maintained. And I'm sure it's the same to how the legislature, whom we advise, as Honourable Chair members have correctly pointed out, is also interacting with the processes and the branch that is the executive leadership in the in governments. If one, say, does not get this positioning right and the roles and responsibilities correct in terms of the Constitution, then one does become almost become co-opted into positions that may not be or that actually undermines the purpose of the having 3 spheres that are distinct and interrelated, and then to maintain that intergovernmental fiscal relations going, and in terms of the and cooperative governance, the principles of cooperative governance. And so when and I'm saying all that to really contextualize this properly, because it is crucial that FFC, this should not, and we have a separate independent process for that, to speak with the minister and speak with the administration, or shall we say the department. But we should not, we are not, and it's not nowhere to be found in the law, in the legislation anywhere. And in fact, and therefore that we would take it that it is not correct to do so. To say that to be instructed to just go and talk to National Treasury per se. I think there has been mistakes that's done in the past, whereas from legislatures or from parliaments even saying that FFC just go talk to National Treasury. That would not be the correct approach. It's not in the Constitution. Constitution is very clear in that we talk to the legislative branch of government, not the executive. right, branch in that sense. I want to then quickly move into some of the other technical side. Socioeconomic infrastructure overview. The issue raised by Honorable Masipa on the service sector is a matter that is of a little bit about data, but it's also useful to actually understand what it's actually saying from that perspective. For instance, the service sector in the data, there are two sets. One is the personal services, which includes things like even basic services of, like actually government services in that sense, public services. So in the labor force surveys, in the labor market indicators. But when it comes to economic indicators, it suddenly becomes something called community services. The reason for that is obviously because of the nature of the subjects and the data that it's coming out. So the labor force obviously more focused on the individual. And then on the economic or the GDP measures, that is more about activities, economic activities. And so sometimes you might see these gaps and discrepancies, but ultimately it's all sort of saying the same. It's trying to measure something that underlying it, it's all supported by what we term as sort of the infrastructure. There's things that we don't really have a absolute measure and on basically saying that this, say, a bridge or this sort of water services is providing so and so much economic value in that sense. So the measure is a bit shall we say, vague. But in the literature, there are various ways to try and measure this, but just note that there are certainly things in terms of infrastructure as a concept that is not particularly or technically defined as well as one would maybe hope so, or has been utilized, for instance, in positions such as infrastructure-led growth, for instance. So. And the next question, infrastructure is key. Does devolution not play a role? And indeed, FSC, we have, I wouldn't say in the past supported or strongly or advocated for devolution, because ultimately it is a political decision and a policy position to take. However, what we are advocating is for evidence-based, informed policy decisions. And so if in a situation where devolution does show potential and has been in slow progression or as over time evolution that shows better delivery of basic services and infrastructure delivery and or development, then by all means, that's the position of the FFC. And then it's evidence-based. And so in the same way, and yes, Honorable Masipa is right, that we note that Western Cape Province and also the cities, and particularly the city of Cape Town, has long been advocating for devolution of especially the rail infrastructure. Our advice there would be bring the data, bring the case, and with it, your evidence-based supports foundation to make this case for devolution, and then always lean towards the principles of the in the Constitution in terms of rights to these services and access to these services, and also it does say in the Constitution that economic development being a key purpose of government activities and objectives. Honorable Mbombo, indeed, this year in particular, I think the various segments and parts and questions regarding the budget process is being raised, and is a particular. I think the best way to answer this is to the Constitution and also IGFR Act saying why 10 months before. It's precisely to for our recommendations as FFC on the divisional revenue, essentially the budgets, to be before the medium-term expenditure, the medium-term budget policy statement to be made by Minister of Finance. Because the reason why that MTBPS is called MTBPS is because it basically sets out already, right? It's the mini budget before the main budget next year, to say that this is what we envisage as the fiscal position in the fiscal framework that will be in the next year in terms of revenues, in terms of expenditures, and what we will be looking towards in terms of, and especially on the side of tax and revenue laws for the coming financial year. And so, in fact, there is already, 10 months before the main budget actually, it leaves only 2 months after the financial year starting. So I don't know, we have seen noted, especially through this year, that could we not bring the process earlier? How earlier can you be if you're already 10 months before and there are only 12 months in a year? So we believe the problem really lies in that the laws and inclusivity or participatory process of the budget process, it's already embedded in the Constitution. What now has been lacking is the execution, the consistency, and the implementation and the, compliance, and to some respects, in terms of the budget process. And so to that end, our advice here, may I suggest to this legislature and this committee, is to utilize, obviously debate first and then to adopt, that's the ultimate purpose, the FFC submission as we presented to you today, and then to communicate that to the NCOP and the NA standing committees on these recommendations. Because what we've brought to hopefully assisting substantiating your arguments or your positions as the province through the provincial legislature in a legislative environment to national parliament and to the executive branch, ultimately at the national level, on the fiscal framework. And then at the same time also to provinces and provincial executive branch, especially in terms of the provincial fiscal framework. Honourable Chair members, we note actually that Western Cape has been in terms of the law trying to have this Provincial Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act. Right, and so that is also a useful way to bring about a legislative process and procedure, especially looking at the provincial fiscal framework that is part of the national fiscal framework. I want to also then, Honourable Heron, that question about the equitable share formula, we have basically equitable share formulas for both provincial and local governments. But your second question about is it fair, I think it's a bit, it needs to be two parts, okay? Not on the provincial and local, but both are essentially in terms of the formula, shall we say, it's fair in that both have the rationale behind the constructions, the composition of these formulas. The problem is that it becomes the issue of fairness. It becomes a bit more complicated as soon as the indicative calculated shares are presented, but then there are these other mechanisms that is being imposed or implemented by National Treasury unfortunately, with also the provincial treasuries on accepting the amendments and updates and other changes and adjustments after the formula. This is something that FFC in our budget submission have raised, is that we look to these updates and amendments after the formula, post the formula, to be a significant risk to this fairness and equitability and the transparency of these equitable share formulas. There are two that are essentially that we are targeting at, and perhaps a further conversation and engagement needs to be planned for this. One is the phase-in. So what that means is that basically whatever calculated shares, what happens is National Treasury then puts in this phase-in, which delays that effect of the equitable share by 3 years, or effectively by a third. And the problem is, okay, well, does that mean by year 3 we will be there? Not really, because every year when the data updates, it's again delayed by a third. And again, next year it's delayed by a third. So one could argue that it's actually never reaches the fair allocations as was calculated via the formula. So you see, this is a significant issue in terms of whether is it fair. On the other thing is that recently we noticed, and this is in our submission, that recently the National Treasury has been moving money and updating, and these are adjustments, they call it, after or outside of the equitable share formula. That and the rationale or the justifications for these adjustments are say sometimes it's conditional grants being merged, and sometimes it's just because there is something happening, and there was a case that's been submitted by the province, and therefore they make these adjustments outside the formula. And these, again, now these are purely, as far as we can see, or with the information presented, are just subjective, or to some extent also political in that sense, because we don't find evidence behind substantiating for these adjustments outside. Quick answering your problem about the poverty line versus unemployment. It's the difference between households and heads of households or income earners of households. I think that it should resolve that concern. Is the okay, I think Honourable Barons also asked about the equitable share. The oversight mechanisms on the equitable share, Honourable Member, you raised a very pertinent issue, is that the oversight mechanisms is here. It's with the legislative branch of government, and with hopefully us as assistants and assisting you in that oversight mechanism on the equitable share, and also all allocations to the provinces and the both. But I think it's worthwhile to now consider, as earlier points up, as you point out about the climate change issue and all these sort of national debt matters that is sort of impacting on the provinces, is that provinces and especially legislatures and or legislative branch of government as a whole ought to have a bigger say, on how these policies and positions, decisions are being taken. Because, for instance, on climate change, I do want to just raise the issue that recent developments on climate change and or these other funding requirements. Yes, it's labeled as government guarantees or contingency reserves for addressing climate change, or even including the just transitioned initiatives propelled and also, say, imposed by the World Bank and other international organizations as part of the signing, I guess, obligations of the COP agreement. Is that we need to think for ourselves here as South Africa. Is it not premature for our industries, which is coal-based in terms of the energy production and also our industrial composition and characteristics, is it not to early for us to be engaging on expensive, renewable green energy and all that. And also the way to do it, fine, we're going for green energy, that sounds good, but the approach is also of problem because it's labeled as government guarantees, but in actual facts, we are paying interest on it. It might as well just be debt. And all that commitment operating at the national level certainly has an impact on the fiscal framework and therefore on the equitable sharing of nationally raised revenue. Ultimately, in the past, essentially decades or so, through these government guarantees and through these wastages and commitments at the national level, and debt obligations and interest charges, it certainly has taken a lot of resources away from the envelope that could have gone and resources that could have gone to provinces and local governments. Lastly, Honourable Masipa, that question about COCT budget, innovative approach, we mean to optimize revenue, existing ones even. And on that, particularly the COCT's budget proposal, our advice, again, it's actually already we put it in the front, is that lean to the Constitution, right? Because revenue for local government, obviously, it's a large part of it. It's all about trading services of the basic four services, right? And so the case and the advantage of the COCT's budget proposals should be then focusing on how to justify that your revenue increase or revenue optimization strategies are linked squarely to and directly to the sustainability of your municipal budget or Metro's budget to continue delivering basic services to the people of the Western Cape and of the city of Cape Town. Then I think it would be a much bigger case and a much stronger case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mbova.
No, thank you so much, Chairperson. I just wanted to just conclude on our side, just to say thank you so much for the opportunity to present yourselves. And if there are any further questions, Chair, from the members and yourself, these can be sent to us in writing as well. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. I do know that member Masipa was trying to ask another question. I think he's had 2 bites of the cherry. I don't know how he hopes to do a 3rd bite of cherry. But possibly, if that's a short question, we can perhaps just entertain that, Dr. Mbava, if that's possible.
That's fine, Chair. Honourable Masipa can go ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mbava. Yeah, I did hear conflicting statements, so I just want to clarify that. So you, Dr. Mbava, said, no, we do engage with the ministers and so forth. And obviously, get the name now quickly, just the last presenter, did indicate that we must be careful that, the Fiscal Commission's focus is obviously on empowering legislatures, which I agree fully. I don't have a problem. So I just want just to understand as to, we have been providing a lot of data with regards to whatever that we are doing. The Premier last night was on ENCA, talking about the police devolution and the challenges and service delivery, the ratio of police to obviously to residents, which is very low, very high, which needs to be taken care of. So I think all this we have done. We have tried to provide every data that we needed to. So what next then? I think that's the question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa. Dr. Mbava.
Okay, I think your question is in two-part, Honorable Masipa. Do we engage with the executive? And then you also ask about devolution. So I'm going to answer the one about engagement with the executive. The Financial and Fiscal Commission does not directly engage with the executive, right? So when we say executive, we mean the cabinet ministers or the departments in our work. We do get data from them, but in terms of dealing directly with the ministers, no, we don't. We deal with the legislatures, we deal with the parliament as yourself, and we deal with the Minister of Finance in terms of the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act. So before he tables the fiscal framework, before he tables the division of revenue bill, he must consult. So when we say we deal with the minister, we mean in that sense that we have to engage with the minister. In fact, he must engage the FFC and get its views on the division of revenue bill before he tables it. So we do deal with him in that sense. But with the other ministers, the other cabinet ministers, we make our recommendations to yourself. And therefore, it is you as the legislature who must hold those national ministers accountable in terms of the FFC's recommendations. That is my understanding of our mandate. Chen, if you can just come in with regards to the devolution of the police.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, so I think to answer directly, Honorable Masipa, is that the next step is when we have actually looked at some of these proposals, if you like, on the devolutions. We don't see a strong, or shall we say, rather, rooms for improvements, especially on the front of the Constitution, because Constitution actually does provide for provincial and local governments' own fiscal, and forget about fiscal yet, right? First, just functions, and then you can also supplement it with the fiscal powers that is already devolved. And the trick, maybe the next step, is maybe to just therefore connect that the motivations for devolution with these principles of the Constitution, which allows or advocates already for you that for example, that you will improve or ensure the fiscal sustainability of the province or even of the municipality, then you can add that to your arguments. And by the way, I should, I think, of course, verify, but we are actually, as Financial Fiscal Commission, we are actually part and parcel of that process. So I was going to maybe even state that and invite, say, send that case to us as the Financial Fiscal Commission, because in the Constitution it says that you do have to actually first consult with the FFC when you make the cases for for cases for the own revenue or even own fiscal sustainability and the fiscal envelope of the provinces of local government. So that maybe is just a long way of saying is that one come and very invited to share that with us so that we may also provide our recommendations on your submissions for these changes, which ultimately has got IGF, Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations, impact of these devolutions initiatives.
Thank you very much for those responses. I know we have now gone well past 12 o'clock, which is the the end time of this meeting, and I'm sure that is what was indicated to you as the Fiscal and Finance Commission. I've noticed a couple more hands there, and I'm suggesting that possibly we deal with those questions and send those questions through to the FFC as part of the resolutions then of this committee. I'm also very mindful of the time and the valuable time of the Fiscal and Finance Commission, and I don't want to prolong their meeting beyond the agreed period of time. So I think I would certainly wish to thank the FFC for a very insightful, a very thoughtful presentation. It certainly has left us with a lot of thought and a lot of processing that we need to go through on our side, and those discussions certainly will be taken very seriously, and I think we will reflect and consider the presentation that has been made to us, and then take the process further so that we can achieve the best for our province. So at this stage, I would then like to thank the Commission, and that if there are any closing remarks from themselves, then we can excuse them at that stage. I think from our committee's perspective, once they've excused themselves, possibly we can just take a 3 to a 5 minute comfort break, and then return to deal with the other matters that we need to do before wrapping up this meeting. Dr. Mbava, would you have any closing remarks?
No, just to say thank you so much, Chairperson, and thank you so much to all the members for a very vibrant and very insightful discussion. This is one of the committees that we as a Commission enjoy coming to because of the level of engagement that we get. So I thank you so much again, and if there are any other questions, please do send them in writing. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, and you are then excused. Enjoy the rest of the Friday and the weekend. To the members of the committee, according to the time on the laptop, it's now 12:11. I think if we can just quickly take a leg stretch or comfort break, or grab another cup of coffee, and then we'll be back at 12:15 just to continue with the rest of our matters. Thank you. Hi there, colleagues. I see it is 12:15. I think is everyone sort of back at their microphones and back at their laptops?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So I think let us then continue. And I think thank you very much to the entire committee for the conduct of this meeting and the way we've dealt with these matters. I'm sure that we could have continued the discussion with the FFC for a while longer, but I also just gained the impression that there was sort of in their mind that they should also stick within the time limit that we have. So certainly, if there are additional questions there, I think we can add those questions, which we can submit to the FFC. However, what has become apparent during the course of the discussion, and including the contributions by our honourable members, it is also quite clear on the type of role that we as a budget committee need to play in relation to the budget, and obviously the background and detailed evidential type of information and data that needs to be assembled in weighing up a budget and making any of those decisions. And I think we would certainly have reflected that in other positions. Those of us who've been in local government would also have been fairly clear on all of those conditions and the understanding on which the budget is then based. And I think what we do have, we have a number of legacy issues that have been on the business plan spreadsheet as such, as been kept by the procedural officer. And I did have a discussion with Mr. Davids yesterday prior to this meeting, and there are a number of items that were raised previously there where the committee felt that they wished to interrogate certain of the departments. Now, I think what we need to clarify in our own minds is the rules and relating to the work, the rules on the powers and functions that the budget committee does have. And I think we need to probably each take a read of those powers and functions just to understand where we are. And what I'm suggesting on a number of those legacy items, in effect, really wrap into some of the issues that have been exposed in this session today, and that we, in effect, the way I see matters is that given the presentation that the FFC has made to us today, I am suggesting that we raise a number of these issues then with the various departments, in effect with the executive, for their commentary and input on how and on whether our budget and whether our objectives and our targets that we've set for ourselves are still on track to be achieved and can be achieved, or whether there are adjusting type of processes that need to be undertaken and within our next budgets, and that would then include the various negotiations and engagements and discussions that need to take place, whether they deal with equitable share, whether they deal with aspects of devolution and making available more resources and policy relaxations and so forth, so that can have a better effect on our citizens and economic activity and the well-being of our citizens. I'm not sure if that possibly summarizes our way forward. I look forward to comments from yourselves. I see Honourable Mbombo, and then Honourable Bryant, and then Honourable Boyson.
Thank you, Chair. I think the information is good, but I'm looking at the time frames in terms of the cycle of the budgeting process. For example, they will have already made an input by May. It happens throughout to the minister. The government's department, knowing it from a former executive, would have submitted through the provincial treasurer to the National Treasury by June. And think by end of July, National Minister will have received all of this information. Because it's around about October, it could be end of September, October, that's when now the minister does the presentation in Parliament of the medium-term budget policy statement. Immediately after that, the provinces now will have their own that will influence, where they will tell the departments, this is the framework, fiscal framework. So please now work out on what we call the MTEC, medium term, blah, 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 whatever. It's MTEC, where the department now will make a case to the provincial treasury and also with the premier staff there in terms of what they want to do. But within that framework, if now there is any appropriation, some of them, they might say they want rollovers and whatever, and that if there will be new monies or there will be any appropriation related to even to the rollovers, that's one now they will come around about November by us. They do this November, then November, that's when they come to us now to the legislature. So that in preparation for the SONA, when the president does the SONA, and then the finance minister in Feb does the finance budget, is already taken care. So the point that I'm trying to raise about where in this stage of processes that will be able, where we can come up, because they were suggesting, come up with a position. When do we provide this position to the NCOP? At which stage the NCOP can table this? Or but it should be NCOP, it should be our representative from NCOP, because I don't know how, at what extent that the legislature can write directly to the NT and say, please smuggle this as part of the MTB, medium-term budget policy, MTBPS. So I don't know how the process is going to be. I'm trying to figure it out, how it's going to work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Member Mbombo. I think, you've set that out very nicely. But I sit with the same type of conflict that you have. But I think we have to start somewhere. And this would appear to be the earliest opportunity that we receive the documentation or the report from the FFC that, as you've indicated, would probably have been around now for a number of months already. So I think my way of thinking is we've got to start at this point and raise these issues, and then once we have been through the cycle of seeing the annual reports of the departments and been through that process towards the end of the year, in other words, around about that November period, we should possibly be looking at it once again and asking for those levels of updates to make sure that they are included in the cycle. So that is just what some of my thoughts are. Member Bryant, Member Boyson, Member Nkondlo.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think one of the recommendations that was made is that the findings of the Commission are debated by our Parliament. And I really think we have an enormous opportunity here to take that up, to present that as a debate in Parliament. And it can come from the committee as a resolution, yourself as Chair possibly. Because I think a lot of the things that have been raised are things that have been alluded to previously in some of the other debates, but without all of the substantive information to go along with it, so that we can really get into the meat of that debate. So I think as a starting point, that would be a good step in the right direction, and that is my recommendation in line with the recommendation of the Commission. Thanks.
I like what you say there, Member Bryant, because the one approach that I had gone through my mind is, do we take this at committee level? And I think what you've indicated is that our step should possibly not be straight at committee level. We would then request that this matter then gets debated in the House as such. I'm moving on to Member Boyson. Obviously what we are doing is sort of developing this discussion right now. I see thereafter members Nkondlo and Petrus.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I want to go back to the first presentation of mobility, and what I'm going to raise here cuts across mobility, POX, and the fact that we had that presentation here. Somebody can advise, maybe the procedural officer, Chairperson, that I would recommend, Chairperson, that we invite SAPS Western Cape to come and brief us or give us a presentation in terms of how are they dealing with the senseless killings between state-funded commuter entities versus the taxi guys, like what we've seen, happening in Gauteng as an example. And we also had some incidences in George a couple of months ago. So, Chairperson, I don't know where that would fit in, but I think we should get a brief on that before we deal with it as being reactive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Boyson. I think I earlier just alluded to the powers and functions of the Budget Committee, and I think what the concern that has been expressed to me and that I also have is that in the discussion that we permitted on mobility earlier today, we were in fact dealing with the nuts and bolts and the internal workings of mobility, where there were a number of those questions should have been leveled at via the standing committee on mobility. And if they dealt with in terms of the financial statements and the financial reporting and the annual reporting of mobility, possibly at the Public Accounts Committee. What we are dealing with on a budget committee is more the overall policy level and the policy direction in which we are directing the budget, and what the issues that would then need to be taken into concern in terms of the overall economic streaming and events that affect the overall budget outlook. And I think, as has been discussed, so I think those are sort of the simple types of distinctions that we are taking. And I think what the debate that they referred to, that Member Bryant has now mentioned, is a debate on the proposals being put forward for and issues for consideration that have been put forward by Member Bryant, that Fiscal Commission has then laid before us in this report. I'm moving on to Member Mkondlo and then Member Petrus.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies because I don't know, I got cut from the discussion, I think, of the FFC. So I'll send my questions to the committee coordinator. That's number one. Secondly, Chair, perhaps also to save time, appreciating that you must respond to each and every suggestion by a member. But maybe if you can just try and do that at the end, because we are really taking a bit of a longer time in this committee at this point. But I just wanted to say, Chair, in as far as what we need to do with the Fiscal Commission, perhaps we need to go back in the mandate of the Fiscal Commission so that also we are able to separate what is our role as a committee of parliament with a duty to oversight versus the executive. Because in any way, the executive will always come to parliament in as far as budgets are concerned. And such budgets, we still have, opportunities to discuss those particular budgets, national, including provincial budgets. So I think it's important for us to be able to separate in terms of the separation of powers between the executive and also and the executive arm of the state and the roles that we are given. And for any other matter, we still have a responsibility we have not concluded that was started by this parliament in as far as an instrument to amend money bills. And I'm raising this once again because this was a matter that was raised in the committee, since we started, and it was said that that work, which was done in the last parliament, is going to be continued. And I think it's one of the things that we ought to do so that when we have any particular issues we want to raise in as far as provincial budget is concerned in the allocation, we do have such particular instrument. But I think when it comes to the FFC and their recommendations, I support the suggestion to have those discussions, from this committee, and then were advised by the committee coordinator. How will that be done? Will it be done through a report from this committee that gets to be presented in Parliament and discussed by all parties through declarations or statements that they were going to be making? So it's important to understand what exactly, the process of engaging with such recommendations of the FFC and the extent to which some of those recommendations, are either optional or are recommendations that are compulsory by either national or including provincial ministers of finance to actually implement, because that's also something that we ought to try and understand what is its legal implication on some of those recommendations, whether they're about the policy aspect in as far as how allocations are done, including the issue of the equitable share formula, which is a matter that has been debated here in the province, and we have had negotiating mandates which we give to our reps which are in the NCOP right up to the NA. So I'm just saying, I think the current instruments would also have to assist us in understanding that what is it from this point if we're saying we would like to make some recommendations to the FFC, as part of the work that it needs to do to the Minister of Finance, or finance in general. So I just wanted to raise those issues so that, we don't blur the lines between what is the role and the responsibility of the legislative sector versus the executive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Member Mkondlo. I think that, is some important comments that you have made there. And I think that we do need to process that, and I'll obviously be looking to the procedural officers so that we can document that. And I think fortunately we will also just try and assemble that out of the transcript of this meeting then in the way forward. Member Petrus.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. That's also my concern, Chair. Can't we, before we go to Parliament for the debate, have discussions amongst ourselves in this committee and debate the recommendations and the concerns amongst us, and before we go to Parliament for the debate?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that. I then see Member Murray.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. And I'm not always on this committee as an alternative member, but I want to thank you for the presentation today. I just want to briefly support the call for a debate in Parliament based on the findings of the Finance and Fiscal Commission as proposed by Member Bryant. I think it's important that we also get direction on that going forward. And I'd like to also have an opportunity to submit questions that I didn't get an opportunity to pose to the FFC. But perhaps if I could have that opportunity to submit it to the committee or to yourself for just to follow up. And then I think it's important that we not just have this discussion in this committee as Honourable Petrus says, but I think it should go to the House as a debate, a point of debate. The way forward is based on facts, data, and let's have an open political discussion so that policy can be formulated on our way forward jointly and together. And I think as was stated today by the FFC, that coalitions are the future. And so it's important that we start have open discussions on the way forward in terms of policy direction. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Maria. I think just as a matter of course, I think if there are any further questions that need to be addressed to the FFC, I think let us get them in, and if we can perhaps ask for a deadline on close of business on Tuesday for those questions then to be submitted. I see Member Stoffels and Member Petrus. What I'm ultimately just looking for is to look at the direction in which we take this, and I think the one prior to coming into this meeting, one of the issues that had been in my mind were certain requests and resolutions and recommendations that had been made by this committee, I think possibly going back towards the end of last year, around about November, were that certain of the departments were then asked to make certain submissions in relation to that would have where the various economic events and that have been taking place within the country then get discussed. Now, what I think has emerged, as I've expected, is there's elements of direction and evidential matters that have been put before us by the FFC, and the debate there is that we should discuss this further. And I know that one of the requests then from the FFC, and in effect that is Member Bryant, as I understand, is putting forward, is that we should progress that for a request and a debate within a sitting of our Parliament. and if we go that route, then the question is there a need for a meeting prior to such a debate of this committee so that we can fully acquaint ourselves then in terms of the powers and functions of this committee and the role that we should be placing in more detail based on what we've been informed by the FFC in terms of budget direction. So I think those are the issues that we need to follow, that I'm seeking guidance on from the committee. In the meantime, I've got Member Stoffels and Member Petrus.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm still audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think I'm going to agree with you in terms of your last statement that's saying, in terms of seeking a solution for this thing, I would love the view of the MEC. I don't see her here, Chair, if with your permission. What is she? Because there's different views here. And I think the most probably person who could guide us in this is her. So I'm not sure, Chair, whether I'm out of order when I'm mentioning that, but my belief is that she's supposed also to guide us in terms of how far are we in terms of the presentation that was been given now, and also guide us from there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think, if I can perhaps just intercede there, I think what has, these, I think we are intersecting in a number of the issues that are raised here. I think FFC is saying, and certain of our members are saying, is here are certain events in that are surrounding us in many ways, and we FFC has spoken about the port, they've spoken about poverty, they've spoken about immigration, they've spoken about informal settlements, climate change, infrastructure, the ability to effect infrastructure and get that on the ground. I think we are also talking about PPPs. We are talking about the impact of the new world of tariffs that face us. And I think we, as a parliament, should also then be looking at how do we alter, and to what extent do we need to alter and adjust our budget, given that we are also having a discussion on equitable share in dealing with this. And the question, to my mind, is the best place to discuss this ultimately is the sitting of Parliament to give us direction. Member Petrus?
Yes, Chairperson, I just want to make myself clear again. I didn't say we mustn't go and debate it in Parliament. What I said, I support your second suggestion, Chairperson, that we first discuss matters and then go to Parliament. We have a certain mandate and we must live up to that mandate, Chairperson. So I see nothing wrong for us to discuss it and then go to Parliament.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm just looking for someone ultimately who is then ready to stick his hand up and say, I would like to propose the following, and I would like to second the following on the way forward.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I would then make the proposal that, as per the recommendation from the Commission, this item is referred for a debate by yourself as Chairperson in agreement with the committee to the Provincial Parliament, and then in line with the recommendation from Member Petrus that we have another meeting before then in order to discuss some of the issues relating to that. That's my proposal.
Okay, I think that is fairly well understood. I'm looking at Member Walters.
Second, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Walters. I see Member Masipa and Member Stoffel.
Seconding.
Okay, so I think as permanent members of the committee, I think Members Bryant and Stoffel are permanent members of this committee. Is that correct? Mr. Davids?
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes,
that's correct, Chair.
Okay, so therefore we've got a proposer and a seconder, and I think we are then in agreement on how we will adopt that approach, and I think that then will provide us with the process going forward. What I'm then suggesting is that I will engage with Mr. Davids on when we can set up that next meeting of this committee, and then just to make sure that we are equipped then to discuss the various matters at that committee. I don't know if there are any further guidelines that you as committee would like to give us. It doesn't seem like that. I can definitely sense that the Friday lunchtime call is getting more and more attractive. And I think if everyone is then happy, then we can probably move to that level of adjournment. And as indicated, we will then follow through on setting up the next committee meeting and requesting a debate in the Parliament. Thank you very much for being with us today. I think it has been a pretty stimulating meeting, and I think there is much to ponder, and I have no doubt in my mind that you are going to be reading through this document this weekend, because that's going to be probably the very best bit of reading that you have for the whole weekend. So thank you everybody for being with us today. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.